Chapter 1906. Needless to say, Xiao Yun and Lin Yao were extremely shocked. Warping the 9th level of space. Not to mention them, even their fathers couldn't do it. However, this human before them could actually warp the 9th level of space. That was too unusual. Even the arrogant Yang Feng fell silent at this moment. If he hadn't witnessed the warping of the 9th level of space, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. At this moment, he knew that this human wasn't as simple as he'd thought. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Someone came just now. He seems to be at the 9th stage of the fate chart realm. I don't know his name, but I know that he's too weak. He can't even withstand a single attack from me. How boring. As he spoke, he glanced at Lin Feng and the others. We're going to waste time. The three of you can come at me together. Xiao Yun and Lin Yao's expressions turned slightly unsightly. Meanwhile, Yang Feng suddenly spoke fiercely. Yi Xian, you're really arrogant, aren't you? Yi Xian suddenly looked at Yang Feng and smiled. Arrogant? Is that what you call arrogant? He shook his head and smiled. Let me show you what arrogance is. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure merged with the 9th level of space. Directly merged. Yang Feng and the others were dumbfounded by this scene. Merged with the 9th level of space. All of them were dazed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly laughed with disdain. A low-level civilization that hasn't even comprehended the 9th level of space dares to covet my fate and bloodline? How laughable. Yang Feng and the others had slightly unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Lin Yao spoke abruptly. Young Master Yi, I didn't come here to become enemies with young Master Yi. I just want to get to know young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at Lin Yao. You know me? Lin Yao grinned. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Lin Yao, I, Yi Xian, like to make friends. Let's talk somewhere else. Lin Yao was stunned, and then she smiled. All right. As soon as they spoke, they vanished on the spot. Xiao Yun and Yang Feng's expressions were unsightly to the extreme. After a short moment, Xiao Yun said softly, this Miss Lin Yao is really flexible. Yang Feng's face was gloomy, but he remained silent. He had never suffered such humiliation before. He had wanted to make a move just now. But reason won over impulse. That guy could distort the 9th layer of space-time. Not only that, but it could also fuse with the 9th layer of time and space. Xiao Yun suddenly said, looks like we've underestimated this young Master Yi. With that, he turned around and left. After a moment of silence, Yang Feng also left. On the other side, Yi Xian and Lin Yao were walking slowly in the clouds. Lin Yao smiled and said, to be honest, we underestimated young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled, Miss Lin Yao, can you tell me about the powers of Daoist Mountain? Lin Yao was a bit surprised. Young Master Yi doesn't know about Dao Mountain? Yi Xian asked, do you think I should know? Lin Yao blinked. Young Master Yi, are you from a higher civilization? Yi Xian smiled and said, what do you think? Lin Yao smiled and said nothing. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Lin Yao, I'll take you to a place. With that, he brought Lin Yao into Xiao Ta. After entering Xiao Ta, Lin Yao was stunned. Soon, her expression changed drastically. This, Yi Xian brought Lin Yao away from Xiao Ta. Lin Yao clenched her fists, her eyes were filled with shock. Yi Xian walked to Lin Yao and smiled, Miss Lin Yao, we'll meet again. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the distance. Lin Yao was silent for a long time, then turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to Xiao Ta and began to cultivate crazily. He had tricked Lin Yao and the others into leaving, but he knew that they would come back soon. His top priority now was to improve his strength as soon as possible. Shuetong stopped cultivating. She had reached the life matrix realm, so it would be impossible for her to improve in a short time. On this day, Shuetong came to Yi Xian. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, opened his eyes and looked at Shuetong. What's the matter? Shui Tong took out a stick of candied hawthorn and licked it, then said, "Tell me what might happen next." There are two possibilities. The first is that Dao Mountain couldn't resist the temptation and will kill you at all costs, taking away your bloodline and life matrix. The second is that they are afraid of you and start to investigate you. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. "Can they find out who's behind us?" Yi Xian frowned. "Us?" Shui Tong licked the candied hawthorn. "Your backer is my backer, of course, my backer is also your backer." Yi Xian looked at Shui Tong. "Do you have a backer?" Shui Tong nodded. "My backer is your backer." "Yi Xian," Shui Tong said, "Lin Yao was scared by you just now. The force behind her might become your helper, but I don't think it's very likely." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Shui Tong said, "Helping you is equivalent to becoming enemies with other forces. Moreover, they might want the sword in your hand, your life matrix, and your bloodline." With that, she looked at Yi Xian. "All living beings are greedy, there are no exceptions." Yi Xian smiled. "Then what do you think I should do now?" Shui Tong thought for a moment, then said, "Do you think Dao Mountain will give you a lot of time?" Yi Xian shook his head. Shui Tong asked again, "Can you reach the life matrix realm in another 10 days? 10 days was equivalent to 100 years. Yi Xian shook his head once more. Moreover, even if he could, he wouldn't dare to rush into it. It would not be a good thing to advance his cultivation realm too quickly. His current goal was the seamless realm. Shui Tong continued, "Since that's impossible, we have to think of a way to deal with Dao Mountain." Yi Xian looked at Shui Tong. "How?" Shui Tong smiled. "One word, pretend." Yi Xian's lips perked up. Great minds think alike. 2 hours later, Yi Xian and Shui Tong headed for God King Valley. The moment they arrived, Twilight Valley appeared before them. Yi Xian smiled. "Valley Master Twilight Valley, I will be going to Dao Mountain." Twilight Valley was taken aback, and then he smiled. "Take care, Sect Master Yi." Yi Xian walked up to Twilight Valley and smiled. "Valley Master Twilight Valley, after I leave, you won't have any thoughts about the divine sect, right?" Twilight Valley hurriedly shook his head. "I wouldn't dare." Yi Xian smiled. "I have received benefits from the divine sect and promised Sect Master Shueisheng to protect the divine sect, so I do not wish for God King Valley to make trouble for the divine sect. Is that all right?" Twilight Valley smiled. "Young Master Yi, your journey to Dao Mountain is long. You must be careful." The meaning behind his words was that whether or not he would move against the divine sect would depend on whether or not Yi Xian could survive. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly unsheathed his sword and slashed. Unsheathing the sword determined life and death, and this strike was layered with 4,800 slashes. Twilight Valley paled at this strike, and she hurriedly raised the sphere of light in her hand to block. Boom! The sphere of light shattered and countless rays of blue light shot out. The surrounding spacetime was annihilated, and Twilight Valley herself was pushed back tens of thousands of feet. But before she could stop, a sword was pressed against her forehead. The ninth spacetime folding. This strike was so fast that not even Twilight Valley, who had reached the life matrix realm, could react in time. Twilight Valley was dumbfounded. She didn't even have the ability to fight back against this scoundrel. In truth, Yi Xian was also dumbfounded. He had never imagined that after he folded up the ninth layer of spacetime, the flying sword would reach this level of speed. In that moment, the Azure Profound Sword had been so fast that not even he could react. Too terrifying. At this moment, Twilight Valley sternly said, "Young Master Yi, my God King Valley will no longer touch the divine sect." Yi Xian looked at Twilight Valley. A moment later, the Azure Profound Sword sank into Twilight Valley's forehead. Boom! Twilight Valley was absorbed. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Naive. Promise? That thing was just like one's character. Oftentimes, it was worthless. The azure profound sword flew out of Yi Xian's hand. A moment later, all the divine spirit realm experts in God King Valley were slain by him. An hour later, Yi Xian turned and left. It wasn't long before he returned to the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. The moment he arrived, Mu Qiu appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Qiu hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall was wrong." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Mu Qiu continued, "I, Mu Qiu, had eyes but failed to recognize young Master Yi and offended him. I ask that young Master Yi be magnanimous and let my 10 Ultimate Divine Hall off." As he spoke, he hurriedly took out a spatial ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. "This is a small token of my appreciation. Please accept it, young Master Yi." Yi Xian looked at Mu Qiu. "You know about God King Valley?" Mu Qiu hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yi Xian suddenly slashed out with his sword. Swish! Mu Qiu's head flew into the air, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the azure profound sword. Yi Xian issued a command in his heart, and the azure profound sword flew into the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall. It wasn't long before all the divine spirit realm experts within the 10 Ultimate Divine Hall were killed by him. Never believe the nonsense of your enemies, and never show mercy to your enemies unless you don't have the strength to do so. Who would lie when they had the strength? 2 hours later, Yi Xian headed towards Dao Mountain. On the way, Shuetong suddenly said, "You seem to be very strong." Yi Xian nodded. "I noticed it as well." Shuetong suddenly asked, "Do you know how to get to Dao Mountain?" Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard this. He really didn't know. Shuetong licked his candied fruit and said, "Are you joking?" Yi Xian glared at Shuetong, and then he brought Shuetong into the 9th layer of space. Even though he didn't know how to get to Dao Mountain, the guardian of the 9th layer, Yao Jun, definitely knew. As soon as he entered the 9th layer of space, the space in front of him started trembling, and then Yao Jun walked out. When he saw Yi Xian, Yao Jun was stunned at first, and then he pounced in front of Yi Xian and said excitedly, "Young Master Yi, I finally found you." Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, "Elder Jun, why are you looking for me?" Yao Jun hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, the Hall Master wants to see you." Yi Xian blinked. "Your temporal temple?" Yao Jun nodded. Yi Xian immediately shook his head. "I'm not going." Yao Jun was slightly puzzled. Why, Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm afraid I'll implicate all of you." Yao Jun was even more puzzled. "What do you mean, young Master Yi?" Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. "Dao Mountain wants to kill me. If I go to the temporal temple, won't I implicate all of you?" Yao Jun immediately said, "My temporal temple isn't afraid of Dao Mountain." Yi Xian said, "I'm afraid." Yao Jun blurted out, "As long as my temporal temple is here, no one can touch young Master Yi." Yi Xian was about to say something, but at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Is that so? My Yang clan would like to see if your temporal temple can protect him." As the voice fell, a powerful aura suddenly appeared on the scene. Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and said seriously, "Elder Jun, you will protect me, right?" Yao Jun. P.S. Please vote. It's the new year. Please vote for the new year. Chapter 1907. Dao Mountain's Yang Clan. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. There were 3 great clans in Dao Mountain, Shao Clan, Yang Clan, and Lin Clan. Although these 3 clans would usually compete with each other secretly, they would be extremely united in the face of external enemies. This was because the ancestors of these 3 clans were once good friends. Before they died, they had left behind their ancestral teachings that if there was an external enemy, the 3 clans must stand together and fight together. Temporal Temple might not be afraid of Dao Mountain, but Dao Mountain wasn't afraid of them either. If they really fought, the odds were 50-50. Yi Xian looked to the side and saw an old man walking over slowly. The old man wore a black robe, and his hands were hidden in his wide sleeves. His eyes were like knives, and his body emitted a domineering aura. Seeing the old man, Yao Jun's expression darkened. Life Body Realm. Life Chart Realm was divided into 10 levels, and after that was Life Body and Life Soul. What was Life Body? It referred to the strengthening of one's fleshly body. Generally, reaching the Life Body Realm meant that one had already grasped the power of destiny. This was an extremely mysterious power, and once one reached the Life Body Realm, ordinary godly items wouldn't be able to break through their defenses. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and sneered. Then, he looked at Yao Jun with a cold expression. Your temporal temple wants to protect this human? Yao Jun was about to speak, but the old man suddenly shouted angrily, don't talk nonsense. If you want to protect him, my Dao Mountain will declare war on your temporal temple. We will fight to the death. If you can't protect him, then leave immediately to avoid harming the relationship between my Dao Mountain and your temporal temple. Overbearing. Yao Jun's expression turned ugly. Declare war on the Dao Mountain? He definitely didn't have the authority to make such a decision. At this moment, Temporal Temple's Temple Master Si Qian suddenly appeared. Seeing Si Qian, Yao Jun heaved a sigh of relief. Boss is here. Si Qian looked at the old man. Are you threatening my temporal temple? Yang clan's elder sneered, threatening? Temple Master Si Qian, my Dao Mountain has no enmity with your temporal temple. Why would I threaten you? As he spoke, he pointed angrily at Yi Xian. This human killed my Dao Mountain's experts. My Dao Mountain is here to seek justice. Yi Xian glanced at the Yang clan old man but did not speak. Si Qian glanced at Yi Xian before turning to the Yang clan elder. Sir, this young Master Yi is a guest of my temporal temple. If there's anything, can we talk about it another day? The Yang clan elder stared at Si Qian. Does that mean that your temporal temple is going to protect him? Just as Si Qian was about to speak, the Yang clan's elder spoke again. Hall Master Si Qian, this person belongs to my Dao Mountain. If your temporal temple dares to stop us, then that old man can tell you that from this moment on, we will fight to the death until one side is exterminated. Hearing this, Si Qian's face turned ugly. Fight to the death. He wasn't afraid of the Dao Mountain, but was it worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for a human? One had to know that the Dao Mountain was no ordinary power. If they really fought to the death, even if the temporal temple won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Si Qian's mind. Hall Master, this human isn't simple. Our temporal temple can let him fight with the Dao Mountain, and we can sit back and reap the benefits. That's a good idea. Hearing this, Si Qian glanced at the distant Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm, without a trace of panic. That voice sounded in Si Qian's mind again. This person has no relationship with my temporal temple. It's not worth it to fight the Dao Mountain for him. The grudge between them is too deep. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestor, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth. The youth had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old. Her two small hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of timidity in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. this is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged, "Whether he is crippled or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed, "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning." The great elder coldly replied, "Then do it 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap was heard. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Long sized up the guard and asked with a smile, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You are very good. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply, "I will go through fire and water for the prince. I will not hesitate to die 1,000 deaths." Yi Lang nodded slightly, "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt dizzy, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian ignored Zhang Mu and walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed, "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether or not he is crippled, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then do it 30 times. Very quickly, two Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Long sized up the guard and asked with a smile, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, You are very good. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. From now on, you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the prince, and I will do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1908. He wasn't calling for help. The old man from the Yang clan spoke fiercely when he heard Yi Xian. "Since you're not calling for help, then this old man will beat you to death." He waved his right hand as he spoke, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, the experts from the Yang clan charged forward. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward. Bang! A ray of light instantly drowned the space in front of him, and it didn't take long for a shrill cry to resound from within the ray of light. An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm had perished. Meanwhile, Yi Xian swung his sword once more. Bang! An expert at the 10th level of the Fate Realm was blasted 30 kilometers away, and a flying sword pierced through the center of his forehead as soon as he stopped moving. Bang! The expert's body was instantly crushed, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the green profound sword. The old man's face turned extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. He realized that the powerhouse at level 10 of the life realm could not do anything to Yi Xian at all. Not only could he not do anything to Yi Xian, but he was also being slaughtered by Yi Xian like a chicken. It was too terrifying. In the distance, Yi Xian was just about to attack again. However, right at this moment, an invisible giant hand suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and then it slammed down. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly raised his head and stabbed with his sword. Bang! The ray of light was instantly shattered, and Yi Xian was blasted out of the 9th level of space. When he stopped, his entire body split open, and blood sprayed everywhere. Right at this moment, the space he resided in actually started burning, and it seemed like some powerful force was approaching him. Meanwhile, Xue Tong's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind, "Run." Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and vanished into the horizon, and as soon as he vanished, the region he resided in was instantly obliterated. It was forcefully obliterated. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly, the space behind him cracked open, and then a fist smashed down towards him. There was no space-time pressure, nor was there any space-time suppression. It was just pure power. Yi Xian cried out in pain. What he feared the most was this kind of pure power. Unable to dodge, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and blocked with his sword. Sword domain. That fist landed right in front of Yi Xian. Boom! The sword domain instantly shattered. Yi Xian's eyes widened, and he was sent flying hundreds of thousands of feet away. He couldn't care less about his shattered organs, and he turned around and rode his sword, disappearing into the horizon of the starry sky. Not long after he left, the experts from the Yang clan appeared. Meanwhile, a voice resounded. "He's heavily injured. All of you follow him. I'll be there in 2 hours." The leading old man bowed respectfully. "Yes, Patriarch." Having said that, he led the Yang clan and the other experts to chase after them. On the other side, Si Qian looked into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, Yao Jun appeared by Si Qian's side, and he spoke in a low voice. "Does the Hall Master intend to attack?" Si Qian nodded. The reason Yi Xian's combat strength is so formidable is that sword. That sword is the key. We must obtain that sword. When he spoke up to hear, a strand of cold light flashed through his eyes. Yao Jun was about to say something when Si Qian suddenly vanished on the spot. Yao Jun remained silent for a long time before he sighed softly. He knew that his hall master had been blinded by greed, and he'd only seen the benefits before him while ignoring the dangers that lurked in the shadows. A long time passed before Yao Jun turned around and left. He wasn't returning to the temporal temple, he was fleeing. His intuition told him that if he continued staying in the temporal temple, then a sword might descend from the sky one day, and he'd perish. Yi Xian was flying through the boundless starry sky. At this moment, his injuries could be said to be extremely severe. The shattering of his sword domain was the greatest injury to him. Not only had his body split apart, even his soul had suffered a heavy injury. He wanted to stop and recuperate, but the problem was that there were people chasing after him. At this moment, Xue Tong suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and asked, "How long will it take for you to recuperate?" Yi Xian replied, 15 minutes. Xue Tong licked her candied fruit and said, "Go back to Xiao Ta and recuperate. I'll block them for you." Yi Xian looked at Xue Tong and asked, "Are you sure?" Xue Tong nodded. However, Yi Xian shook his head. "Although you're at the life matrix realm, they're all at the 10th stage. You can't beat them." Xue Tong said, "Lend me some blood." Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Tong suddenly pulled Yi Xian's hand. "Stop wasting time." As she spoke, she suddenly exerted force, and Yi Xian's wrist split open. A stream of blood spurted out, and she sent Yi Xian into Xiao Ta's body. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it and went straight to recuperate. As soon as Yi Xian entered Xiao Ta's body, the experts of the Yang clan appeared here. The old man who led the group looked at Xue Tong and asked, "Where is he?" Xue Tong licked her candied fruit and said, "He abandoned me and ran." The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "He ran?" Xue Tong nodded. "Yes." The old man stared at Xue Tong for a long time. "Kill." He naturally didn't believe Xue Tong. As soon as he finished speaking, he ordered the experts of the Yang clan behind him to charge forward instead of charging forward. Xue Tong closed her eyes slowly, and Yi Xian's blood suddenly started to boil in her right palm. A moment later, she opened her eyes abruptly. Bang! A powerful bloodline pressure instantly swept through the surroundings, and one of the experts of the Yang clan who was charging at the front didn't even have time to react before he was crushed and obliterated. The old man's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly retreated. Meanwhile, Xue Tong suddenly took a step forward and smashed her fist forward. Bang! A blood-red fist flashed through the battlefield and smashed directly towards an expert of the Yang clan. That expert's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly raised his arms to block it while space condensed. Bang! As soon as the fist arrived, the space in front of that expert was instantly blasted into pieces. At the same time, he was obliterated by the blood-red fist. Xue Tong was just about to attack again when the old man suddenly pressed his right hand down. Bang! The expanse of space where Xue Tong resided collapsed. At the same time, she fell into the 8th level of the spatial abyss. As soon as she fell into the spatial abyss, the powerful force there started to destroy her. Xue Tong's brows knit together slightly. She wasn't Yi Xian, so she couldn't disregard the spatial abyss. Suddenly, a sword appeared beneath Xue Tong's feet. It was the green profound sword. The green profound sword had taken Xue Tong out of the spatial abyss. The old man's face instantly fell when he witnessed this scene. What the hell is this sword? It's actually able to take someone out of the spatial abyss. Meanwhile, Xue Tong withdrew a candied fruit in an unhurried manner. She licked it, and then she gazed at the old man. "I'm out again." "Are you angry?" The old man from the Yang clan was speechless. Shuetong glanced at the green profound sword and spoke softly, "It's so nice to have a younger sister." Even though she couldn't use the sword, it could help her. Moreover, she wouldn't feel any pressure at all when she had it by her side. Shuetong suddenly activated Yi Xian's bloodline again, and then she charged forward. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he retreated explosively while another expert in front of him was instantly blasted into pieces. Shuetong was just about to attack again. Meanwhile, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly opened his palm and pressed it down. The space above Shuetong instantly warped, and then a powerful wave of spatial pressure swept down and was about to crush Shuetong. Shuetong frowned slightly and was about to retreat when Yi Xian's voice suddenly resounded in her mind, "Don't move." As soon as he finished speaking, the green profound sword in Shuetong's hand trembled slightly. Shuetong's figure instantly became ethereal when the powerful spatial pressure descended upon her, and she was completely unharmed. The old man's expression instantly became unsightly when he witnessed this scene. Shuetong glanced at the green profound sword and sighed with praise, "I like the feeling of being second generation." Xiao Ta was at a loss for words. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here, and it was the hall master of the temporal divine palace, Si Qian. Shuetong gazed at Si Qian while his brows knit together slightly. Si Qian gazed at Shuetong, "Tell young Master Yi that I want his sword. Give it to me, and I won't attack at all. You should understand what I'm doing if I attack." Si Qian thought for a moment and handed the sword over. Xiao Ta suddenly said, "You're handing it over just like that?" Shuetong replied, "A wise man submits to circumstances." "Understand?" Xiao Ta was at a loss for words. Si Qian was stunned when he saw Shuetong hand the sword over. He was already prepared to attack. However, he hadn't expected that this little girl would actually hand the sword over. Shuetong suddenly said, "Don't you want it?" Si Qian glanced at Shuetong, and then he opened his palm and the sword fell into his grasp. After he confirmed that it was the real deal, Si Qian turned around with the intention of leaving. However, the old man from the Yang clan suddenly obstructed his path. The old man stared fixedly at Si Qian. "This sword belongs to my Yang clan." Si Qian grinned, "Do you know what realm of cultivation I'm at?" The old man's pupils constricted when he heard this, "A fate soul." Si Qian laughed savagely, "You know that I'm a fate soul, yet you still dare to speak to me like that. Are you an idiot?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! The old man from the Yang clan didn't even have the chance to react before his body was blasted into pieces. The expressions of the other experts from the Yang clan changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. Si Qian intended to leave after he killed the old man from the Yang clan. Meanwhile, Shuetong suddenly said, "Since they're enemies, then why not kill them all?" As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and fled. The rest of the Yang clan's experts were stunned. Kill them all? In the next moment, their expressions changed drastically. Wasn't this F*King referring to them? They wanted to flee, but it was too late. In the distance, Si Qian directly sent out a palm strike, and those Yang clan experts were instantly killed. Si Qian turned to look at where Shuetong had been standing. At this moment, Shuetong had already disappeared without a trace. Si Qian hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he did not choose to chase after them. After all, there was no need to do so. The most important thing now was to bring this sword back to the temporal temple. The experts of the Yang clan had died with everlasting regret. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1909. On the other side of the starry sky, Shuetong stopped. Yi Xian appeared in front of Shuetong. In fact, his injuries had already healed. Shuetong looked at Yi Xian. "Will you blame me for handing over the sword?" Yi Xian smiled. "Why would I blame you?" Shuetong looked at Yi Xian for a long time. "You're so sneaky, but I like it. Both of them had the same thought. Leaving the Qingxian sword in Yi Xian's possession would be a disaster. Not only would the Dao Mountain come after Yi Xian, but the Temporal Temple would also come after him. Giving the green profound sword to Si Qian was tantamount to making the Yang clan and Temporal Temple enemies. This would buy time for Yi Xian. What he needed the most now was time. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Temporal Temple's Temple Lord killed the Yang clan's people? Xue Tong nodded. All of them. Yi Xian smiled. How ruthless. Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian. What are your plans? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. A moment later, he said in a deep voice, Do you remember the mysterious expert who attacked me? Xue Tong said, I think it was the Yang clan's patriarch. Yi Xian said softly, With my current strength, I can't fight against such an expert. Xue Tong comforted him. Don't be afraid. We have father. If father can't do it, we still have sister. Yi Xian, at this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, This sister Xue Tong is already infatuated with the second generation. Yi Xian said seriously, Xue Tong, we have to rely on ourselves. Xue Tong nodded. I understand. Unless it's absolutely necessary, we can't call for help. We have to train ourselves. I understand all of this. Yi Xian, Xue Tong took out a stick of Tanghulu and licked it. Then he said, Can I ask a question? Yi Xian smiled. What question? Blood Eye looked at Yi Xian. Just how powerful is your sister? Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ta suddenly said, Don't ask. You're invincible if you ask. The invincible sister Tianming. Xue Tong asked again, What about his father? The azure-robed man. Xiao Ta laughs, Let me put it this way. Master was once beaten by sister Tianming, do you understand now? Yi Xian wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Damn it, he now felt that it was too dangerous to be with this Xiao Ta. Ever since this fellow had been transformed by Qing'er, he had become so arrogant that he no longer cared about anyone but Qing'er. Xue Tong licked the candied fruit and said, Xiao Ta, this invincible. Xiao Ta immediately said, Invincible in all aspects. There's no opponent. There's nothing in the entire universe that big sister Tianming can't solve with one sword. Yi Xian was speechless. Xue Tong nodded and said, I understand. Yi Xian shook his head, Let's not talk about this. Our top priority is to cultivate. I want. At this point, Yi Xian's face instantly changed. He suddenly turned around and saw a middle-aged man in a white robe standing a few hundred meters in front of him. He and Xue Tong didn't know when the middle-aged man had appeared. Both of their expressions turned solemn. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and said with a smile, I think you must think that my Yang clan should go against the Temporal Temple, right? Yi Xian said solemnly, You're the Yang clan's patriarch. The middle-aged man said with a smile, Yes. The Yang clan's patriarch, Yang Lian. Yi Xian smiled lightly, Why did you come to me first? Yang Lian walked slowly towards Yi Xian, Because I feel that you're the biggest threat. Yi Xian frowned slightly, I'm the biggest threat? Yang Lian nodded, You're only at the 20th rank, but you were able to take 2 of my attacks head-on. I've never seen such a monstrous genius like you. Yi Xian turned to look at Xue Tong, It's all because you're too outstanding. Xue Tong looked at Yi Xian, We're on the same side. Don't pretend, alright? Yi Xian, meanwhile, Yang Lian said, You gave the sword to the Temporal Temple on purpose because you wanted my Yang clan to fight the Temporal Temple to the death so that you could reap the benefits. Am I right? By Yi Xian's side, Xue Tong said in a low voice, This enemy is quite smart. What should we do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Fists can't solve problems. We have to be reasonable. As he spoke, he looked at Yang Lian and opened his palm. A drop of blood floated slowly in front of Yang Lian, and Yang Lian's eyes instantly narrowed when he saw this drop of blood. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Sir, to tell you the truth, my father is not an average person." Right at this moment, Yang Lian suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He practically didn't hesitate to grab Xue Tong behind him, and then he took a step forward and activated his sword domain. Bang! A fist smashed down. Yi Xian's sword domain trembled violently before it collapsed, but the fist was still there. Yi Xian suddenly raised his arms in front of him, and the first 8 layers of time and space condensed into a space-time wall. Rumble. Yi Xian's arms were blasted apart, and then his figure was blasted flying. Beside him, Crimson Eye looked at Yi Xian, who was sent flying, with a dull look in his eyes. If Yi Xian hadn't pulled her behind him at that instant, then she would have absolutely been unable to resist that punch. Yi Xian flew for over 30 kilometers before he finally stopped, and a strand of blood sprayed from his mouth as soon as he did. Xue Tong had just appeared in front of him when she opened her palm, and then the blood that sprayed from Yi Xian's mouth fell into her palm. Xue Tong glanced at Yi Xian, and then she stuffed the candied fruit into Yi Xian's mouth. After that, she turned around to gaze at Yang Lian. Yang Lian smiled, "Young man, you showed me your bloodline because you want to tell me that there's someone formidable standing behind you, right?" As he spoke, he shook his head and smiled. "If I saw your bloodline at the beginning, then perhaps I would have considered going against you. But now, enmity has formed between us. Since enmity has formed between us, then we're enemies. The best way to deal with an enemy, especially an extraordinarily monstrous genius, is to eliminate that person before that person can grow. Understand?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot, and then a powerful aura swept through the surroundings and obliterated the space here. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Xue Tong's eyes as she stood before Yi Xian, and then she suddenly clenched her right hand. Bang! Yi Xian's bloodline instantly started burning. A moment later, she took a step forward and smashed her fist forward, and a strand of terrifying force swept out from her fist. 2 formidable forces collided head-on in the most forceful manner possible. Rumble. As soon as their forces collided, the space in the surroundings was obliterated and shattered into pieces. Xue Tong was instantly blasted flying, and she flew over 30 kilometers away. As soon as she stopped moving, her body shattered into pieces, and only her soul remained. In the distance, Yang Lian glanced at his fist. His fist had completely cracked open, and his bones were exposed. A wisp of a solemn expression flashed through Yang Lian's eyes when he witnessed this scene. He knew that he'd underestimated this human's bloodline. It's absolutely not an ordinary bloodline. Who exactly is this human? A string of questions flashed through Yang Lian's mind. Yang Lian didn't give it any further thought and just gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. It's better for such a monstrous genius to die young. When he thought up to here, Yang Lian took a step forward, and then he suddenly clenched his right fist. In an instant, the space around him had warped, and even the 1st to 8th levels of space had warped. Xue Tong clenched his fist slowly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I'll do it." Xue Tong turned to look at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian grinned, "Enter the pagoda." Xue Tong gazed at Yi Xian, "You'll die." Yi Xian immediately placed Xue Tong into Xiao Ta, and then Xue Tong intended to leave the pagoda but was stopped by Xiao Ta. Xue Tong spoke furiously, "Let me out." Yi Xian paid no attention to Xue Tong, and he gazed at Yang Lian instead. Yang Lian said, "You were born with a 9th level fate chart. Come, let me see how tough your life is." As he spoke, he was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's eyes slowly closed while the blood within him started to seethe. Bang! In an instant, a strand of monstrous killing intent and evil energy swept out from the surroundings. Yang Lian frowned when he witnessed this scene. This killing intent is quite unusual. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were like a sea of blood. Bloodline activation. At this moment, Yi Xian hadn't activated his bloodline for a very long time, and the powerful killing intent and evil energy it emanated had directly suppressed his mind. Because Shui Tong had unsealed his bloodline in the past. Even though he'd only unsealed it slightly, it wasn't something he could control right now. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his palm, and then a blood-red sword suddenly appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Hiss! A strand of blood-red light suddenly flashed, and it tore everything in its path apart. A wisp of a cold glow flashed through Yang Lian's eyes. He took a step forward and smashed his fist forward, and a strand of powerful force erupted from his fist like a volcano. It was a head-on collision. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted, and then the starry sky in the surroundings was obliterated and transformed into a pitch-black spatial black hole. On the other hand, Yi Xian was blasted over 10 kilometers away, but Yang Lian was pushed over 3 kilometers back as well. Yang Lian's expression instantly became ferocious after he stopped moving. At the same time, he was quite shocked in his heart. The energy of this bloodline is actually so terrifying. Yi Xian suddenly walked towards Yang Lian with his blood-red sword in hand. Yang Lian stomped his right foot against the ground, and then a fist suddenly arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian swiftly slashed down with his sword. Bang! The sword light shattered, and then Yi Xian retreated explosively once more. This time, he retreated by almost 30 kilometers. However, Yang Lian had retreated by over 10 kilometers as well. Yi Xian's current strength was sufficient to shake him. Yi Xian was about to attack again when Yang Lian suddenly flipped his right hand. In the next moment, the expanse of space where Yi Xian resided collapsed, and then he was blasted into the 8th spatial abyss. But this time, Yi Xian didn't have the green profound sword. However, Yi Xian was still completely fine. Because the formidable energy of his bloodline had directly resisted the formidable energy within the spatial abyss. Yang Lian's expression was slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene. What sort of freak are you? Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. Looks like Brother Yang Lian needs help. As soon as this voice resounded, a middle-aged man appeared not too far away from Yang Lian. It was the Shao clan's patriarch, Shao Tian. Meanwhile, another voice resounded. He really does need help. As soon as this voice resounded, an old man appeared on Yang Lian's right. It was the Lin clan's patriarch, Lin Shao. The 3 great leaders of Dao Mountain were gathered here. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from the side. Are you bullying the weak? That's not good. The 3 of them turned around and saw a woman walking over slowly from afar. Chapter 1910. Yang Lian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the woman. You're the person behind him? The woman glanced at Yi Xian, who had been thrown into the spatial abyss, and smiled. I'm his older sister. Older sister? Yang Lian sized her up and smiled. You want to save him? The woman smiled. Patriarch of the Yang clan, forgive me for being blunt, but you're quite stupid. Yang Lian's face instantly sank, and he smashed his fist forward. Bang! The woman in the distance was thrown into the spatial abyss. However, the woman within the spatial abyss was completely unharmed. Seeing this scene, the expressions on the faces of Yang Lian and the other 3 underwent a wonderful change. The woman continued. In half a month at most, the temporal temple will far surpass your Dao Mountain. Yang Lian stared fixedly at the woman. What do you mean? The woman smiled. You're underestimating that sword. That sword doesn't just disregard the spatial pressure in the spatial abyss, it can enter the 9th layer of spacetime and fold it. Most importantly, it can fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime. Once Si Qian comprehends its secrets, his strength will instantly surpass the Fate Soul stage. Hearing that, the faces of the 3 of them sunk. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, and then she smiled. The most valuable thing in his possession isn't his bloodline or fate, but that divine sword. Why would Si Qian not hesitate to go against all of you to seize that divine sword? Because that divine sword can allow him to fuse with the 9th layer of spacetime and allow him to attain a new height. The expressions of Yang Lian and the others were quite unsightly. The woman continued. So what if the 3 of you obtain this little fellow's bloodline and fate? It can't allow the 3 of you to attain a higher level. Yang Lian suddenly said, you want us to fight the temporal temple to the death. The woman smiled, and then she looked at the Shao clan's patriarch, Shao Tian, and the Lin clan's patriarch, Lin Shao. What do the 2 of you think? The 2 of them fell silent. Of course, they were thinking about that divine sword. The fact that the temporal temple had seized it by force proved everything. However, Yi Xian was also a threat. Thinking of this, the 3 of them looked at each other and decided to kill Yi Xian first before snatching the divine sword. At this moment, the woman had already entered the 9th layer of spacetime with Yi Xian. The next moment, the woman and Yi Xian disappeared. Seeing this scene, Yang Lian's face fell, and he was about to give chase when Shao Tian suddenly said, stop chasing. Yang Lian looked at Shao Tian and Shao Tian said solemnly, this woman is very mysterious. She was actually able to bring that young man out from the spacetime abyss. Her strength is extraordinary. Even if we catch up to her, we don't have full confidence that we can defeat her. Our top priority now is to go to the temporal temple and take back that divine sword. Yang Lian said in a low voice, we're letting Yi Xian off just like that? Lin Shao glanced at Yang Lian, then why don't brother Yang Lian continue chasing after this Yi Xian while the 2 of us head to the temporal temple? Hearing this, Yang Lian's expression turned cold. What do you mean? Lin Shao said indifferently, nothing. I just want brother Yang to understand that once Si Qian comprehends the secret of that sword, our Dao Mountain will have to bow down to the temporal temple. Yang Lian was silent. The Shao Tendo said, let's go to the temporal temple. After saying this, he and Lin Shao disappeared from the spot. Yang Lian was silent for a long time before he followed them. On the other side, in the starry sky, a woman stood in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's bloodline power had been suppressed by her, but Yi Xian had not woken up yet. At this moment, Shui Tong appeared in front of the woman. She looked at her and asked, who are you? The woman Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onwards, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The person who spoke was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides of him were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling, this is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. Once again, she bowed to the elders and said, Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. But now, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged, whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The great elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position. It's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded, "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall, do not hold back." Understood. Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yiling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the clan, and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists, and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and said with a smile, What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through water and tread on fire for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall, do not hold back. Understood. Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The Great Elder's eyes narrowed, and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1911. Yang Lian and the other two had already rushed in front of Xi Qian. Three powerful forces charged toward Xi Qian, about to crush him. Xi Qian's expression was calm, and his eyes were filled with disdain. At this moment, Xi Qian suddenly took a step forward and laughed. "Come, have a taste of my sword's sharpness." As he spoke, the profound chi in his body surged into the green profound sword like a tidal wave. In the next moment, he slashed. A sword to the end. Xi Qian was stunned. Because this sword did not have any strength. What was going on? Before Xi Qian could think further, Yang Lian and the other two's powerful forces drowned him. Rumble. Xi Qian was sent flying tens of thousands of meters away. At this moment, everyone was stunned. What was going on? Xi Qian, who had stopped, had his body completely shattered. At this moment, his eyes were lifeless, and his mind was blank. After obtaining the green profound sword, he had been studying it with some scholars of the temporal temple, and had never used it personally. Therefore, he did not know that he could not use this sword. On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "That sword is strange." Xiao Tian nodded. At this moment, Xi Qian, who was far away, suddenly swung the green profound sword fiercely. However, there was no strength in the green profound sword. Xi Qian stopped, and he understood. He could not use this sword at all. Thinking of this, Xi Qian roared angrily, "Yi Xian." On the other side, Yang Lian said solemnly, "He has been tricked." At this moment, Xi Qian suddenly threw the green profound sword in his hand towards Yang Lian and the other two. Xi Qian stared at Yang Lian and the other two. "The sword is yours." Yang Lian remained silent. Xi Qian sneered, "What, you want to destroy my temporal temple? Forgive me for being blunt, but even if you can destroy my temporal temple today, how many experts does your Dao Mountain have left? Moreover, that Yi Xian is still secretly happy." Yang Lian glanced at Xi Qian, then kept the green profound sword. "Let's go." With that, he turned and left. Dao Mountain and the other experts also left hurriedly. On the battlefield, Xi Qian said fiercely, "Find that Yi Xian at all costs. Find him." Not long later, all the experts of the temporal temple began searching frantically for Yi Xian. Yang Lian and the others had stopped in the starry sky. Yang Lian glanced at the green profound sword in his hand and said, "I'm unable to utilize this sword." Lin Xiao asked solemnly, "Can't you use it?" Yang Lian nodded, and then he passed the azure profound sword to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao held the sword in his hand, and a short moment later, he frowned. "Looks like only Yi Xian can use this sword." "Yi Xian." Xiao Tian suddenly said, "Find this Yi Xian." Soon, the experts of the Dao Mountain began searching for Yi Xian in a frenzy. Within the Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was a pile of soul crystals, which were currently being burned, and were constantly pouring power into his body. Gradually, a powerful aura emanated from Yi Xian's body. Break through to the seamless realm. After a long time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment, he had already absorbed 1,000,000 soul crystals. Xiao Ta suddenly asked, "Have you reached the seamless realm?" Yi Xian nodded. Now that he had reached the seamless realm, he was still unable to contend against Xiao Tian and the others. The difference in their realms was still too great. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Xiao Ta, tell me, how did Qing achieve 10 years in the pagoda, but 1 day outside?" Xiao Ta said, "I want to know, am I still a pagoda?" "Yi Xian," Xiao Ta said, "Young lord, what are you trying to say?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, space-time conversion. Xiao Ta was slightly puzzled. Space-time conversion? Yi Xian nodded. The space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. It should be said that the space-time inside the pagoda is higher than the space-time outside. Do you understand what I mean? Xiao Ta said, I don't understand. Yi Xian was speechless. He pondered for a moment, then said, 10 years in the pagoda, 1 day outside. This means that the space-time inside the pagoda is different from the space-time outside. Or in other words, the space-time inside the pagoda is of a higher grade than the space-time outside. Xiao Ta said in a deep voice, be more direct. Yi Xian said, if I merge with you, is it equivalent to merging with this mysterious space-time created by Qing, Xiao Ta hesitated, then said, do you want to try? Yi Xian nodded, I think I can try, but I need your cooperation. Xiao Ta said in a deep voice, will it be dangerous? Yi Xian said, probably not. Come, Xiao Ta, let's merge again. Xiao Ta turned into a golden light and disappeared into Yi Xian's forehead. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble violently, and his body gradually started to become illusory. Moreover, the space-time around him actually started to vanish bit by bit, and even the 9th layer of space-time started to vanish bit by bit. However, Yi Xian's face instantly turned pale. Because he noticed that his body was slightly unable to endure the space-time within Xiao Ta. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to release Xiao Ta. He couldn't endure it. At this moment, his forehead was covered in sweat, and his entire body had split apart. Xiao Ta spoke in a low voice, young master, I don't think it's possible. Yi Xian shook his head, it's possible. However, I can't endure it for too long. As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged and started to heal himself. 2 hours later, Yi Xian's injuries were more or less healed, and then he merged with Xiao Ta once more. To be more precise, he merged with the space-time within Xiao Ta. During those few breaths of time, Yi Xian hurriedly sensed the mysterious space-time. However, it was only for a few breaths of time. After a few breaths of time, he had to start healing himself, and then continue with the merging. Just like that, time passed by bit by bit. Yi Xian tried again and again. After countless attempts, he could finally borrow Xiao Ta's strength to merge with the mysterious space-time. However, he could only endure for 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths of time, he must separate from it. Otherwise, his body would be directly destroyed. Moreover, he needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. After merging with the mysterious space-time, Yi Xian began to try to use the mysterious space-time. He tried many times, and finally, he could use the mysterious space-time's pressure. This made Yi Xian extremely excited. Because he realized that the mysterious space-time's pressure could easily destroy the 9th layer of space-time. In the following period of time, Yi Xian tried again and again. Unfortunately, he couldn't enter the mysterious spacetime's abyss, nor could he change the mysterious spacetime structure. Not only that, he couldn't even feel the mysterious spacetime's density. He could only use the mysterious spacetime's pressure. However, this was enough for him. Of course, even if he wanted to use the mysterious spacetime's pressure, he still needed to borrow Xiao Ta's strength. Simply put, if he threw out the pagoda now, even the 9th layer of spacetime could be easily destroyed. Yi Xian sighed. This Xiao Ta was finally useful. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. As soon as he left Xiao Ta, the space in front of him shook violently. Yi Xian frowned slightly, so fast. At this time, a middle-aged man walked out from the space in front of him. The person who came was the Yang clan leader, Yang Lian. Yang Lian stared at Yi Xian, I've been looking for you for so long. You. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he tossed Xiao Ta out, and Xiao Ta transformed into a golden ray of light. In the distance, Yang Lian frowned slightly. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically, and he suddenly put his palms together and pressed them forward. Bang! In an instant, the first layer to the 8th layer of spacetime around him condensed into a spacetime wall. Xiao Ta arrived with a bang. Bang! The spacetime wall in front of Yang Lian shattered, and at the same time, Yang Lian transformed into nothingness. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this. Is it that terrifying? Before this, he didn't know how strong the mysterious spacetime's pressure was. He only knew that it wasn't weak, but he hadn't expected it to be so strong. Instantly killing a life soul realm expert? Yi Xian was extremely excited. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian put Xiao Ta away, turned around, and ran. He could only use it once, and he had to heal for 2 hours after using it. Because the exhaustion was truly too great. Not long after Yi Xian vanished with Xiao Ta, Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao appeared here, and they remained silent as they gazed at the nearby spacetime hole. Yang Lian was gone. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly, it couldn't have been Yi Xian, right? Xiao Tian shook his head, he doesn't have that strength. It might have been the woman who saved him earlier. Lin Xiao's expression was quite solemn, since he was able to kill Yang Lian without anyone noticing. Then his strength. Xiao Tian's expression was quite unsightly. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly, why don't we return the sword to him? Xiao Tian spoke fiercely, will he let us go if we return it? He won't. We have irreconcilable enmity with him now, so he won't let us go even if we beg for mercy. Moreover, my Xiao clan can't bow and scrape to him. Lin Xiao spoke solemnly, my Lin clan can't do that either. Xiao Tian gazed into the distance with an icy cold expression, I'm going to the Divine Dao Nation. Lin Xiao frowned slightly, the Divine Dao Nation? Xiao Tian gazed at the green profound sword in his hand and said, I'm going to give this sword to the Divine Dao Nation. Doesn't Yi Xian have the ability to do so? He should go ask for it from the Divine Dao Nation. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, are you really going to give it to them? Xiao Tian nodded, this sword is useless in our hands. Why don't we give it to the Divine Dao Nation and let that fellow, Yi Xian, become enemies with the Divine Dao Nation? As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings and said, let's go right now. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Lin Xiao hesitated for a moment and said, I'll go with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly chased after Xiao Tian. Yang Lian's death had terrified both of them. After all, Yang Lian was in existence on the same level as them, yet he died soundlessly. In other words, the person standing behind Yi Xian could kill them soundlessly as well. At this moment, they'd finally come back to their senses. On the other hand, the temporal temple was still searching madly for Yi Xian. 2 hours later, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta amidst the starry sky. He gazed at Xiao Ta in his hand and roared with laughter, I'm finally invincible. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta said, young master, my intuition tells me that you won't last for more than 3 days before your enemies might advance again. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1912. Yi Xian's face darkened when he heard Xiao Ta's words. Damn it, that's really possible. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian, young master Yi. Yi Xian turned around and saw that space was torn apart a few hundred meters away, and then a middle-aged man walked out. It was the temporal temple's Yao Jun. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback when he saw Yao Jun, Elder Jun. Yao Jun glanced at the surroundings and said in a deep voice, young master Yi, all the experts of the temporal temple are looking for you. It's best that you leave quickly. Yi Xian looked at Yao Jun and smiled, why are you helping me? Yao Jun smiled bitterly, young master Yi, don't ask so many questions. The temporal temple will find you in at most 10 minutes. At that time, Yao Jun's face changed drastically, they're here. They're here. Young master Yi, take care. After he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished on the spot. Right after Yao Jun left, the the space a few hundred meters to the right of Yi Xian was torn apart, and a middle-aged man walked out. It was the Temporal Temple's temple master, Si Qian. A wisp of killing intent flashed in Si Qian's eyes when he saw Yi Xian. Yi Xian. It's been so hard to find you. Yi Xian smiled. Temple Master Si Qian, is my sword useful? Si Qian's face instantly became ferocious. Yi Xian. How dare you trick me? Die, old man. As he spoke, he was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly smashed his pagoda forward. Strike first and gain the upper hand. Si Qian's face changed drastically when he saw Yi Xian's pagoda smashing towards him. He didn't defend himself, but instead took a step forward and punched out. He used all his strength because he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian. Moreover, he felt danger. This punch caused the entire starry sky to boil and then be annihilated. As Yi Xian's pagoda came crashing down, rumble. The space where Si Qian resided was directly shattered, and he instantly retreated explosively. As soon as he stopped moving, only his soul remained. Moreover, his soul was vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Si Qian was stunned. In the distance, Yi Xian's face was also a little pale. The consumption of using Xiao Ta was too great. He could only use Xiao Ta once in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Si Qian suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. Why? Yi Xian looked at Si Qian. What do you mean why? Si Qian asked crazily, why? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, because I have backing. Si Qian's expression froze. His soul disappeared and he died. Meanwhile, countless experts of the Temporal Temple had appeared here, and their expressions instantly became extremely unsightly when they saw Si Qian perish. The Hall Master has been killed by Yi Xian? Yi Xian glanced at the experts of the Temporal Temple. Are all of you going to attack me together? All the experts of the Temporal Temple glanced at Yi Xian, and then they turned around and fled. Even the Hall Master had been instantly annihilated. How could they dare to continue fighting Yi Xian? Yi Xian didn't chase after those experts of the Temporal Temple. He was in an extremely bad state right now, and the important matter at hand was to recuperate. Yi Xian entered Xiao Ta, and he'd basically recovered an hour later. After he left Xiao Ta, Yi Xian sensed the green profound sword, and it didn't take long for him to frown. Because the sword was quite far away from him. Where does that fellow from the Xiao clan intend to take it? Yi Xian frowned, and he chased after it a short moment later. 3 days later, Yi Xian, who was riding his sword in space, suddenly stopped. Tens of thousands of meters in front of him stood a majestic city in space. Yi Xian walked in, and he saw 3 big words above the city gate, Millennium City. After entering the city, Yi Xian was shocked. The city was very prosperous, and the streets were dozens of meters wide. Tall buildings stood on both sides of the street, and it was densely packed, giving off a slightly oppressive feeling. There were all kinds of living beings walking on the streets. Their auras were powerful, and most of them were life matrix cultivators. Yi Xian was somewhat speechless. Damn it! These life matrices were all over the place. At that moment, a carriage suddenly drove over from the end of the street. It wasn't 1 horse, but 3. The horses were abnormally tall, and they were several times taller than ordinary horses. They were covered in black scales, and their hooves emitted blood-red flames. Everywhere they passed, they left a trail of fire. As the saying went, there were sparks and lightning along the way, and it was extremely dazzling. A woman sat in the carriage. She wore silver battle armor, and her long silver hair was tied into a ponytail. She held a blood-red whip in her hand, and when she waved it, thunder flashed. At that moment, someone on the street exclaimed, "It's Princess Dao Ling." Following this exclamation, all the experts on both sides of the street stopped and bowed. Yi Xian looked at the experts around him, and he was somewhat shocked. What kind of princess was this woman? Could she be a princess of the divine Dao nation? Just as Yi Xian was thinking, Princess Dao Ling's carriage suddenly stopped near Yi Xian, and she looked down at Yi Xian. "Why don't you bow?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he said, "I'm new here, and I don't know the rules of this city. Please don't take offense." Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian, and after a moment, she suddenly said, "Disrespecting the royal family and blaspheming the dignity of the royal family, execute him on the spot." With that, two mysterious experts suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian, and two cold lights slashed at the back of Yi Xian's neck. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He opened his palm, and a sword light suddenly flew out. Chi chi. The heads of the two mysterious experts flew into the air. All the experts present were shocked. This fellow dared to attack the royal family? Dao Ling sized up Yi Xian. "You're a swordsman." Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed down with his sword. Dao Ling narrowed her eyes, and the blood whip in her hands suddenly swung down. Boom! A wave of sword light and blood light suddenly exploded, and Dao Ling was directly blasted thousands of meters away. Seeing this, the experts on both sides of the street changed their expressions, and they all turned and ran. Who was this Dao Ling? She was the favorite princess of the current divine Dao nation's king. Moreover, Dao Ling was the saintess of spiritual mountain. How noble was her identity! And now, someone was actually her opponent? In the distance, Dao Ling glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you know what you're doing?" Yi Xian was about to speak when a group of cavalrymen suddenly charged out from the distant street. There were more than 100 of them, and all of them wore thick pitch-black armor and emitted a powerful murderous aura. The leader of the cavalrymen hurriedly came before Dao Ling and knelt on one knee. "This subordinate deserves to die for protecting your majesty late. Please forgive me, princess." Dao Ling said plainly, "Commander Chen, the one who deserves to die is not you, but someone else." Commander Chen stood up and looked at Yi Xian. With a wave of his right hand, the cavalryman charged at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword light suddenly flew out. Chi! 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 In an instant, the heads of all the cavalrymen flew out, and 100 streams of blood shot into the sky like a fountain. It was extremely bloody. Commander Chen's expression changed drastically at the sight of this, and he hurriedly said, "Princess, you leave first." There was a hint of seriousness in Dao Ling's eyes. She stared at Yi Xian and asked, "Do you know what you're doing?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you trying to say that you have a backer?" Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian. "You're provoking the Dao God Nation and Spirit Mountain. And you'll pay the most painful price for this." Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. "You provoked me first, didn't you?" Dao Ling was expressionless. "You don't respect the imperial family, so you deserve to die." Yi Xian sneered. "What a joke. I was born with an unyielding character. Why would I bow down to a woman like you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward and slashed with his sword. Drawing a sword to decide life and death. The moment the sword slashed down, a powerful force of sword Dao instantly shattered the spacetime in front of him. Dao Ling's expression changed drastically. She waved her right hand, and the blood whip in her hand swept across with a powerful bolt of blood lightning. Head on. Boom. The blood light suddenly shattered, and the blood whip in Dao Ling's hand shattered. At the same time, she was instantly sent flying out of the city. As soon as she stopped, a flying sword suddenly slashed at her. Dao Ling's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment, she smelled the scent of death. But at this critical moment, a shadow suddenly appeared above her head. The next moment, Yi Xian's flying sword stopped. Seeing this scene, the cavalry commander nearby was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground. If Dao Ling died here, then they would be in big trouble. In the distance, Yi Xian looked at the shadow above Dao Ling's head. The shadow was very blurry, and its true appearance could not be seen clearly. However, it was not the real body, but a wisp of shadow. At this moment, Dao Ling bowed slightly. Master. A powerhouse of Spirit Mountain. The shadow looked at Yi Xian. You have such a high level of sword Dao cultivation at such a young age. Who are you? Yi Xian shook his head. An outsider who has just arrived. The shadow frowned slightly. Just arrived? Yi Xian pointed at Dao Ling not far away. I just arrived and don't know the rules here. Your disciples saw that I did not bow to her and wanted to kill me. Do you think this? The shadow suddenly said, you did not bow to her, and she wanted to kill you. What's wrong with that? Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he smiled and said, why should I bow to her? The shadow looked straight at Yi Xian. Don't you know that she is the princess of the divine Dao nation and the holy lady of Spirit Mountain? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Just because of that, I should bow to her? The shadow looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said, why don't you bow to her? A sinister look flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. The princess of the divine Dao nation? The holy lady of Spirit Mountain? My father is invincible, my brother is invincible, and my sister is invincible. Am I proud? Ah. F***CKU. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. In the next moment, he suddenly threw him. Boom! The shadow was directly smashed into nothingness by Xiao Ta. At the same time, Dao Ling's physical body was directly shattered by the powerful shockwave, leaving only her soul. P.S. I was too busy returning to my hometown. I'm afraid of losing my roots. Don't mind if I lose my roots. Forgive me. Chapter 1913. Seeing this scene, the expressions of many experts in the dark changed. Who is this guy? How dare he not give face to the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain? Does he want to die? Dao Ling was also a little dumbfounded at this moment. This guy actually erased his master's virtual image? Most importantly, this guy didn't give face to the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain. This was the first time she encountered someone who didn't give her face. Dao Ling stared at Yi Xian with a gaze that was like a sword, as if it wanted to pierce through Yi Xian. Do you know what you're doing? Yi Xian didn't waste any words. He suddenly appeared in front of Dao Ling and slashed with his sword. Chi! A sword light flashed, and Dao Ling's soul was directly erased. Completely erased. She didn't even have a chance to reincarnate. The experts in the dark gasped when they saw this scene. He really killed her. And he did it so ruthlessly, directly erasing her without even giving her a chance to reincarnate. This was equivalent to slapping the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain in the face. Who is this young man? On the other side, Commander Chen's face was extremely pale, and his entire body was trembling. Princess Dao Ling was killed just like that? After killing Dao Ling, Yi Xian turned and left. At this moment, Xiao Ta suddenly said, young master, why can't you endure it? Now that you've killed her, endless trouble will come again. Yi Xian said plainly, I'm not a tortoise. Why should I endure it? Xiao Ta sighed softly, then you'll have two super enemies, the divine Dao nation and spiritual mountain. Yi Xian smiled. What can I do? You saw it too. I, Yi Xian, didn't bully anyone. She bullied me first. Xiao Ta was silent. Yi Xian continued, yes, if I had bowed and saluted, there might not have been all this trouble. But Xiao Ta, why should we bow to her? Just because she's the divine Dao nation's princess? The saintess of Mount Lingshan? I don't care so much. I only know that if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I'll definitely offend them. Xiao Ta said, I know what you mean, and I also know that you have a backbone. How do you plan to deal with the spiritual mountain and the divine Dao nation next? Yi Xian shrugged. If we can win, we fight. If we can't, we run. What else can we do? Xiao Ta said, then why didn't you run? Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. Someone's here? Xiao Ta asked, can't you feel it? The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Feel my ass. As he spoke, he rode his sword and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Not long after Yi Xian disappeared, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared on the scene. The beautiful woman glanced downwards with a gloomy expression. She was Dao Ling's master, the Grand Elder of Spirited Mountain, Lan Ling. After a short moment, Lan Ling turned around and left. Pass down my order. Find this person at all costs. The Divine Dao Nation. The Divine Dao Nation was located in the Divine Dao Star region. In the past, the Divine Dao Star region was extremely chaotic, and there were hundreds of thousands of forces of various sizes. But in the end, a Divine Emperor appeared in the Divine Dao Star region, and he unified the entire Divine Dao Star region in a short 100 years. He established an unprecedented super force, the Divine Dao Nation. A woman walked slowly in a hall in the Divine Dao Nation's imperial palace. She held a thick ancient book in her hand. The woman read very seriously, and the corners of her mouth curled up from time to time into a charming smile. The woman wore a wide white dress, and there was a soaring purple phoenix at the end of the dress. The phoenix's eyes were sharp as it looked down upon the world. The woman was the current king of the Divine Dao Nation, Dao Ling. She was known as the most powerful woman in the universe. Right at this moment, an old man walked to the entrance of the hall. When he saw Dao Ling reading, the old man's right foot that was about to step into the hall stopped in midair. He hesitated for a moment before walking in the end. At this moment, Dao Ling put down the book in her hand and turned to look at the old man. She smiled. What happened? The old man bowed slightly. Your Majesty, Princess Ling is dead. Dao Ling. Dao Ling walked slowly to the entrance of the hall with a calm expression. Who killed her? The old man said, a youth of unknown origin. Dao Ling smiled, unknown origin? The old man nodded, unknown origin. We only know that the other party is a swordsman. Moreover, the other party is only at the Seamless Realm. Dao Ling blinked, and Seamless Realm cultivator killed Ling, who has already reached the life-body realm. The old man nodded. Dao Ling smiled, interesting. The old man bowed slightly, Your Majesty, I have already sent the Imperial Spirit Divine Guards to capture this person. Do you want him dead or alive? Dao Ling chuckled and said, Lord Musa, a young man at the Seamless Realm was able to kill someone at the Life Physique Realm. Moreover, the other party was someone who knew Linger's identity, yet he still dared to kill her. Do you think he's an ordinary person? Musa's expression was calm, no matter where he came from, since he dared to kill Princess Ling, he is looking down on our Divine Dao Nation. He should have his entire family executed. Dao Ling smiled, Spiritual Mountain is already searching for this person? Musa nodded. Dao Ling said, then wait for now and watch Spiritual Mountain's performance first. Musa glanced at Dao Ling and nodded, I understand. After saying that, he paused and said, Your Majesty, Dao Mountain's Shao clan leader requests an audience, saying that he has a divine item to offer to Your Majesty. Dao Ling frowned slightly, Dao Mountain? Musa nodded, a very remote starfield. Because there is no value there, it is not within our Divine Dao Nation's territory. Dao Ling asked, he said he has a divine item to give me? Musa nodded, also, he wants to give it to Your Majesty in person. Dao Ling smiled, interesting, let him see me. Musa nodded, and then he left. It didn't take long for Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao to arrive before the hall. They were just about to raise their heads to look at the Divine Dao plume when an invisible pressure enveloped them, causing their expressions to change drastically, and they hurriedly lowered their heads. At the same time, they were astounded to the extreme. They were Life Soul Realm cultivators. Yet, this woman could suppress them with just an aura. How terrifying was that? Shandao Ling sat down at the side and smiled. You want to give me a divine item? Xiao Tian hurriedly said, yes. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and the green profound sword floated over to Shandao Ling. The smile on Shandao Ling's face instantly vanished when she laid eyes on the sword. It was replaced by a solemn expression. Meanwhile, Xiao Tian hurriedly said, Your Majesty, we obtained this by chance. The knowledge of time and space contained within this sword far exceeds our understanding. So, we've specially offered this sword to Your Majesty. Shandao Ling held the sword and looked at it for a short while before she gazed at Xiao Tian. Where did you obtain the sword? Xiao Tian hesitated for a moment and was about to speak when Shandao Ling said, I'll only give you one chance to speak. Think it through. Xiao Tian was shocked and did not dare to play any more tricks. He immediately said, The two of us obtained it from a young man. Shandao Ling frowned slightly. A young man? Xiao Tian hurriedly nodded, yes. Shandao Ling said, Tell me about that young man. Xiao Tian didn't understand, but he didn't dare refuse, so he immediately told her about Yi Xian. At the side, Musa furrowed his brows. Shandao Ling gazed at Musa, and the latter nodded. It should be that young man. Shandao Ling chuckled, interesting. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao. I really like this sword. What reward do the two of you want? Both of them were overjoyed when they heard this, and Xiao Tian hurriedly said, It's good that you like it, Your Majesty. As for the reward, Your Majesty, feel free to do as you please. Shandao Ling gazed at Musa, Take them away and entertain them well. Musa glanced at Shandao Ling and nodded slightly, understood. As he spoke, he gazed at Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao, Come with me. Xiao Tian and Lin Xiao hurriedly bowed respectfully to Shandao Ling, and then they turned around and left with Musa. Within the hall, Shandao Ling gazed at the green profound sword in her hand and clearly fell silent. The green profound sword. In next to no time, Musa appeared within the hall, and she spoke in a low voice, Your Majesty, this sword? Shandao Ling handed the green profound sword to Musa, Take a look at it. Musa glanced at the green profound sword before him, and his expression became solemn, This sword. Shandao Ling said, Summon the palace master of the Shingong Palace, Mu Qiao. Musa immediately turned around and left. A few moments later, Musa brought a white-haired old man into the hall. This person was the palace master of the Shingong Palace, Mu Qiao, and he was responsible for the forging of the weapons of the entire divine Dao nation. Mu Qiao bowed respectfully to Shandao Ling, Your Majesty. Shandao Ling pointed with a finger, and the green profound sword landed before Mu Qiao. Take a look at this sword. Mu Qiao picked up the green profound sword and sized it up. Moments later, his expression became solemn, This sword, may I ask Your Majesty, where did you get this sword from? Shandao Ling asked, Can you forge this sword? Mu Qiao glanced at the green profound sword and hesitated for a moment before he said, This. Compared to the person who forged this sword, I might still be a little lacking. A little. Shandao Ling said calmly, Then you can't. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, If Your Majesty is willing to let me study this sword for half a year, I'll definitely be able to forge a divine item that surpasses this sword. Shandao Ling shook her head, You can't. Mu Qiao was quite confused, Why not? Shandao Ling looked at the green profound sword in his hand and said softly, The Tao of space and time contained within this sword is unfamiliar to even me. Mu Qiao hurriedly said, Your Majesty, let me study this sword for a month. In a month, I'll definitely be able to forge a sword that surpasses this sword. Shandao Ling suddenly said, If you can't, you can resign and go home to retire, is that all right? Mu Qiao's expression froze, and he bowed slightly moments later, Your Majesty, the old man still has matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. After saying that, he turned around and left. Shandao Ling shook her head and looked at Musa, Investigate this person's background. Musa nodded before turning around and leaving. Within the palace, Shen Daoling looked at the green profound sword in his hand, and after a short while, she grinned, I know you have a spirit, so I won't ask anything else. I just want to ask a question. What grade of sword do you belong to? Sol fell silent for a moment before saying, there's no grade. I'm invincible below 3 swords. Chapter 1914. Under 3 strikes. The divine Dao Ling smiled, which 3 strikes? Sol replied, Big brother young master's father, and young master's younger sister. The divine Dao Ling's eyes narrowed slightly, young master? Sol replied, yes. The divine Dao Ling suddenly turned around, guards. Meanwhile, a man in black armor who carried a huge saber on his back walked in. The divine Dao Ling said, send my decree. Tell the spirit mountain not to make things difficult for that young man. The armored man bowed slightly, turned around, and left. The divine Dao Ling's expression gradually turned solemn as he gazed at the green profound sword in his grasp. Yi Xian walked slowly through an unknown mountain range. His destination was the divine Dao nation's capital because he sensed that the green profound sword was there. At this moment, the space in front of him suddenly trembled. Yi Xian's expression was calm. The reason he hadn't flown on his sword was because he wanted to avoid some trouble. He hadn't expected that they would be able to find him just by walking. Since it was like that, then it was over. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked out from the crack in space. It was the Spirit Mountain's Grand Elder, Lan Ling. Lan Ling gazed at Yi Xian, since you dared to disregard my Spirit Mountain and the Divine Dao Nation, then I presume your background isn't simple. However, I'm very curious about the power behind you. Yi Xian smiled, there's no enmity between me and the Spirit Mountain, and I have no intention of offending it. It was your holy maiden who wanted to kill me first. You. Lan Ling shook her head, I didn't come here to listen to you. When she spoke up to this point, she walked slowly towards Yi Xian, the strong have no need to listen to the weak. Understand? Yi Xian suddenly tossed. Bang! A ray of golden light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Lan Ling's expression instantly changed drastically. She opened her right hand, and a golden shield suddenly appeared in front of her. Bang! The golden round shield shattered, and Lan Ling's physical body was crushed along with it. Lan Ling, who only had her soul left, was stunned. At this moment, a sword suddenly pressed against Lan Ling's forehead. Lan Ling's expression changed drastically. If you dare touch me, the spiritual mountain will slaughter your entire sect. Yi Xian blinked. If you want to slaughter me, I'm a little afraid, but if you want to slaughter my entire family, at this point, he said seriously, don't stand on ceremony. Quickly go slaughter them, especially my father. You're welcome to go find him. Don't hold back, use all your strength to beat him up. Lan Ling glared at Yi Xian. I underestimated you. Now, we can talk. Yi Xian was so angry that he laughed. I want to reason with you, but you want to talk to me with your fists. I want to talk to you with my fists, but you want to reason with me. I'm not your father. Why should I spoil you? As he spoke, he suddenly punched out. Boom! Lan Ling was blasted into nothingness by the punch. Completely erased. Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept down from the distant horizon. In next to no time, the horizon split open, and a middle-aged man walked out from within. Mount Master of the Spiritual Mountain, Mo Lien. Along with Mo Lien's appearance, dozens of spiritual mountain powerhouses appeared. Among them, there were a total of 12 life soul realm powerhouses. They were surrounded. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Xiao Ta suddenly said, Young lord, it was a moment of pleasure to kill. How are you going to clean up now? Yi Xian said calmly, what can I do? If it were you, Xiao Ta, would you take it lying down? Xiao Ta said, Young lord, I've never seen you so unyielding towards master. Yi Xian said, that's my father. Isn't it only right and proper for me to give in to him? If he wasn't my father, I would've. Xiao Ta said calmly, what do you mean by that? Young lord, you sound like you can beat master. Yi Xian shook his head. Xiao Ta, how did father tolerate you until now? Xiao Ta, at this moment, Mo Lian suddenly said, you killed our holy maiden and grand elder of spiritual mountain. How dare you? Yi Xian was about to speak, but Mo Lian suddenly said, kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his palm. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a cage, and the experts from the spiritual mountain were about to attack. However, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here. The middle-aged man wore black armor and carried a large saber on his back. Seeing him, Mo Lian frowned. Lord Enzhua. Enzhua said, His Majesty has decreed that all powerhouses of spiritual mountain return immediately. Return immediately. Hearing this, Mo Lian frowned. Return immediately? Lord Enzhua, what does His Majesty mean? Enzhua looked at Mo Lian. Return. Mo Lian pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Lord Enzhua, this person killed Princess Ling, you, Enzhua said, return immediately. Mo Lian's expression was somewhat ugly. Enzhua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back and slashed forward. Mo Lian's expression changed drastically and he blocked with his arm. Boom! Mo Lian instantly retreated tens of thousands of feet, and spacetime was destroyed. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. This guy is a bit fierce. That saber just now actually shook the 9th layer of spacetime. In the distance, Mo Lian's expression was extremely ugly. Of course, it was mostly fear. Enzhua looked coldly at Mo Lian. Return to the mountain. This is the last warning. Mo Lian glanced at Yi Xian beside him, then turned around and left. He was not afraid of Enzhua, but behind Enzhua was the woman who represented Divine Dao Nation. After Mo Lian and the powerhouses of Spiritual Mountain left, Enzhua turned to look at Yi Xian. His Majesty requests an audience. Yi Xian asked, the ruler of Divine Dao Nation? Enzhua nodded. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, can I not go? Enzhua suddenly pulled out the large saber on his back. Yi Xian hurriedly said, go. Let's go now. Enzhua nodded. Please. Yi Xian felt somewhat helpless. On the way, Yi Xian looked at Enzhua. Why is His Majesty looking for me? Enzhua shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian asked again, is His Majesty angry that I killed your Princess Ling? Enzhua shook her head again. I don't know. Yi Xian thought about it and asked again, Your Majesty. Enzhua looked at Yi Xian. Young master, I don't know anything. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. Can you be quiet? Yi Xian. After Yi Xian and Enzhua left, Mo Lian watched Yi Xian and Enzhua disappear into the distance and said, this person probably has a backer in Divine Dao Nation. Someone is protecting him. A spiritual mountain powerhouse said, then what should we do? Our first elder and saintess going to die in vain? After a moment of silence, Mo Lian said, didn't the divine marquis's grandson, Wenren Yu, like the saintess? Now that the saintess has been killed, he can't sit back and do nothing. Inform Wenren Yu immediately. Also, use all the connections of spiritual mountain in Divine Dao Nation to kill this person. The spiritual mountain elder nodded. Understood. Mo Lian looked at the horizon in the distance and then turned to leave. 1 hour later, Yi Xian and Enzhua arrived at the Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital. When they arrived at the gates of the Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital, Yi Xian was somewhat surprised. This Divine Dao Nation's imperial capital was not big. Or rather, it was a little small. At this moment, Enzhua said, Young master, remember, no fighting is allowed in the city. Yi Xian asked, what if someone provokes me? Enzhua glanced at Yi Xian. In any case, no fighting. Yi Xian continued to ask, what if someone hits me first? Enzhua looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, who would hit you for no reason? Yi Xian asked, what if? Enzhua said, young Master Yi, no one would take the initiative to hit you. You. At this moment, a young man suddenly walked over from the street in the distance. This young man was wearing an embroidered robe and had a sword at his waist. He held a folding fan in his hand. With one look, one could tell that he was a distinguished young master. Seeing this young man, Enzhua hesitated for a moment and then bowed slightly. Greetings, young Marquis. Young Marquis Wenrenyu. Wenrenyu ignored Enzhua and looked at Yi Xian. Why didn't you kneel and greet this Marquis? Yi Xian pulled on Enzhua's sleeve. Didn't you say that no one would come looking for trouble with me? Enzhua, at this moment, Wenrenyu smiled and said, not greeting this Marquis is looking down on etiquette, the divine Marquis residence, and the divine Dao nation. With that, he looked at Enzhua. Lord Enzhua, Enlu, how should we deal with this person? Enzhua said in a low voice, young Marquis, His Majesty has summoned him. Wenrenyu smiled. Did I stop him from seeing His Majesty? What I'm saying is that this person didn't greet me. He has violated the laws of the divine Dao nation. Enzhua frowned when he heard this. How could he not discern that Wenrenyu had come to cause trouble on purpose? Enzhua hesitated for a moment and then looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, Yi Xian blinked. You wouldn't want me to greet him, right? Enzhua said, just greet him. Wenrenyu looked at Yi Xian and lightly tapped the folding fan in his hand. He smiled but didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled. He said that the people of the divine Dao nation must greet him, but I don't seem to be from the divine Dao nation. Wenrenyu suddenly smiled, but you're standing on the territory of my divine Dao nation. Since you're standing on the territory of my divine Dao nation, then you should obey the laws of my divine Dao nation. Yi Xian gazed at Wenrenyu and smiled, young master, there's no enmity between us, right? Wenrenyu walked over to Yi Xian and grinned, don't we have one now? Yi Xian smiled, the last person who asked me to greet her seemed to be called a divine Dao spirit. Right, she's completely vanished from this world now. Wenrenyu's expression instantly turned cold. He took 2 more steps forward and smiled, come. Hit me. Provocation. Yi Xian suddenly withdrew Xiao Ta and smashed it down. Bang. Wenrenyu wasn't even able to react before he was smashed into pieces by Xiao Ta. Everyone here was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Even Enzhua hadn't expected that Yi Xian would suddenly attack, and he hadn't even been able to stop Yi Xian in time. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Xiao Ta returned to his grasp. He glanced at the spatial black hole that Xiao Ta had created. Hit you? I'll fucking kill you. As he spoke, he gazed at Enzhua and spoke furiously, I hate second-generation disciples that rely on their fathers and ancestors the most. How embarrassing. If everyone was like me, Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta suddenly said, young master, that's enough. I'm very embarrassed. You're the strongest second-generation disciple in the world, so what's there to say? Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. It's the new year tomorrow, so I don't have time to write. What should I do? I haven't stopped writing for an entire year, so I can apply for leave. Brothers. Chapter 1915. Following Wenrenyu's death, the entire street became quiet. Wenrenyu. That was the divine Marquis young duke. What kind of existence was the divine Marquis Manor? The divine Marquis Manor's ancestor was one of the founding fathers who followed the divine emperor to conquer the world. In order to reward the divine Marquis Manor's ancestor, Wenren Tian, the divine emperor personally decreed that as long as the descendants of the Wenren clan did not rebel, they would be exempted from death. But now, someone actually killed the Wenren clan's young duke. Moreover, this young duke was the Wenren clan's only son. Things were getting out of hand. Next to Yi Xian, Enzua's expression was also extremely ugly. Damn it. Why did this guy dare to kill anyone? Was he crazy? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Lord Enzua, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring me to your emperor. Enzua said solemnly, Young Master Yi, things are getting out of hand. Yi Xian said, that's why we have to hurry up and see your emperor. Right now, only your emperor can protect me, right? Enzua was speechless. You still know who can protect you. Without further thought, Enzua brought Yi Xian to the palace. He also knew that only his emperor could solve this problem. He was a little afraid of Yi Xian now. This guy was also a tiger. He dared to kill without a word, regardless of who the other party was. Tiger. The two of them had only taken a few steps when a hunchbacked old man suddenly appeared in front of them. Behind this hunchbacked old man stood 10 experts in dark armor. The Wenren clan. Seeing this hunchbacked old man, Enzua hesitated, then bowed slightly, Lord Yu Xian. Yu Xian. The Wenren clan's housekeeper. However, this was not an ordinary housekeeper. He was once a commander of the imperial army. After leaving the palace, he became a housekeeper at the Divine Marquis Manor. Yu Xian glanced at Enzua, then at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he charged forward and threw a punch at Yi Xian. This punch seemed to contain the stampede of a magnificent army, and a monstrous momentum instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not retreat. Instead, he took a step forward, drew his sword, and slashed. Boom! A sword light shattered, and Yi Xian instantly retreated several thousand feet away. Yu Xian suddenly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot, and he was like a ferocious tiger that had left its cage as he punched straight at Yi Xian. This punch caused the surrounding space to distort and transform into a space-time vortex. In the distance, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and took a step forward. In an instant, a wave of sword light engulfed him and Yu Xian. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the sword light shattered. Yi Xian retreated another 100 feet. After Yu Xian stopped, he was about to attack again. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and Xiao Ta appeared in his hand. Just as he was about to activate Xiao Ta again, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this person, Enzua heaved a sigh of relief. Musa. This person was the current divine minister, Musa. In the Shinto nation, he had great prestige and power. Seeing Musa, Yu Xian did not attack again. Instead, he bowed slightly. Lord Divine Minister. Musa turned to look at Yi Xian, then at Yu Xian. His Majesty has summoned him. Anything can wait until His Majesty has met him. Yu Xian said solemnly, Lord Divine Minister, young Master Yu is dead. Musa frowned. I told you. His Majesty has summoned him. Yu Xian's face turned ugly. Right at this moment, a cough suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw a beautiful woman walking over slowly from afar. Musa's face darkened when he saw this beautiful woman. Yu Xian and the rest quickly went over and knelt down. Greetings, Mistress. Situ Jing of the Divine Marquis Mansion was the current ruler of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Situ Jing walked slowly to Musa. Musa hesitated for a while, then bowed slightly. Old man. Situ Jing chuckled. I know that the Divine Marquis Mansion is not the same as before. In terms of power, we are indeed no match for you, Lord Divine Minister. However, the Divine Marquis Mansion is not a place that can be easily bullied. Then, she lightly tapped the walking stick in her right hand. Boom! The ground cracked, and in the next moment, hundreds of shadows suddenly rushed out from all directions. Divine Marquis Guards. Musa's face darkened. These Divine Marquis Guards were the bodyguards of the Divine Marquis Mansion. Even the weakest among them was at the divine physique echelon. At this moment, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared beside Musa. There were only 16 of them, but they were all at the divine soul echelon. And these were Musa's own bodyguards. The atmosphere in the surroundings instantly became tense. Situ Jing looked at Musa. Lord Divine Minister, the Divine Marquis Mansion has no enmity with you, and we have never thought of becoming enemies with you. Today, the Divine Marquis Mansion only wants to seek justice. Musa shook his head. Old man, he is the person that His Majesty wants to see. Situ Jing glanced at Yi Xian. Why does His Majesty want to see him? Musa shook his head. I don't know. Situ Jing stared at Musa. He killed you, heir. Musa said in a low voice. Old man, let His Majesty meet him first. How about that? Situ Jing was silent. Around them, the experts from the Divine Marquis Mansion stared at Yi Xian. As soon as Situ Jing gave the order, they would swarm him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, since His Majesty wants to see him, then let His Majesty meet him first. Hearing this, Musa relaxed a little. He nodded and turned to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, please. Then, he turned and left. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and followed him. At this moment, Situ Jing suddenly said, Young man. Yi Xian turned to look at Situ Jing. Situ Jing stared at Yi Xian. No matter how powerful you are, the Divine Marquis Mansion must take your head. Yi Xian walked to Situ Jing. At this moment, Musa frowned. Young Master Yi, don't do anything rash. Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Lord Musa, didn't you see that she was the one who threatened me first? Musa's expression was cold. Young Master Yi, if you do anything rash, no one can protect you. Yi Xian laughed. Rash? What a joke. The moment I entered this city, the Divine Marquis Mansion came to bully me. Why? Only the Divine Marquis Mansion can bully others, but others can't. Or is it that the law of God country only bullies the weak and fears the strong? Musa stared at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, be careful with your words. Yi Xian smiled. All right. I will be careful. Lord Musa, let's go. Let's go and meet your majesty. After saying that, he walked into the distance. Musa glanced at Yi Xian and followed. After Yi Xian and Musa disappeared, Situ Jing suddenly said, pass down my order. Spread the news that this person killed Princess Ling and you, Yu Xian nodded. Understood. As he spoke, his expression became slightly solemn. He knew that old madam wanted to control the public opinion first. But why did he want to control the public opinion? Because this person was not simple. At this moment, Situ Jing asked again, why did you, suddenly find trouble with this person? An expert from the Divine Marquis Constabulary said in a low voice, Old madam, someone informed young master that Princess Ling was killed by that young man. That's why young master came to find this young man. Situ Jing's expression darkened. Spiritual mountain, right? That expert nodded. Situ Jing slowly closed his eyes. His expression was extremely cold. Spiritual mountain, how dare you use the Divine Marquis Mansion? She knew that the Divine Marquis Mansion was being used by the spiritual mountain. That expert said, Old man, I'm afraid that young man's background is not simple. Situ Jing was expressionless. How can someone who dares to kill the princess of God country be simple? However, no matter who he is, the Divine Marquis Mansion will take his head as an offering to you, soul in heaven. Then, she turned and left. Soon, the entire Divine Marquis Mansion began to move. The Divine Marquis Mansion's influence in God country was not to be trifled with. Before long, countless officials of God country had already left for the palace, ready to make a statement. At this moment, Yi Xian and Musa arrived at the entrance of the palace. Musa turned to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, do you know etiquette? Yi Xian smiled. Are you trying to say that I should bow when I see His Majesty? Musa said in a low voice, Young Master Yi, only His Majesty can protect you. Yi Xian suddenly said, My sword is in His Majesty's hands, right? He could already feel the profound green sword. It was in this palace. Musa nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled and walked into the palace. There was only one woman in the palace. It was the divine Dao Ling. Seeing Yi Xian enter, the divine Dao Ling put down a memorial in her hand and smiled as she pointed at the memorials in front of her. There are a total of 1280 memorials, and all of them request for your immediate death. As she spoke, she slowly walked in front of Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. Little fella, I know that you are not simple, but you are too ruthless. First, you killed a princess of God country, then you killed the little marquis of the divine marquis mansion. Furthermore, you did not leave any leeway. Even if I wanted to protect you, I would not be able to. Yi Xian said with a smile, I have never provoked any of your people. The divine Dao Ling blinked. Is that important? It is not. You should understand that reason is built on your fist. If you do not have the strength, you will only be humiliating yourself by trying to reason with me. Yi Xian smiled. I understand. The divine Dao Ling smiled. Then tell me, how will you live? Yi Xian said with a smile, you should know better than me, don't you? The divine Dao Ling opened her palm and the profound green sword appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Who is the person who forged this sword? Yi Xian answered honestly, my sister. Sister? The divine Dao Ling's lips curled up. She is the person behind you, and the reason why you are so unyielding, right? Yi Xian looked at the divine Dao Ling, what do you want? The divine Dao Ling smiled. Young Master Yi, whether you can live or not depends on how strong the person who forged this sword is. As she spoke, she exerted force in her right hand and a mysterious force suddenly surged into the profound green sword. Boom! The profound green sword trembled. At the same time, the space before her warped. A few moments later, the divine Dao Ling looked up. A few breaths later, the corners of her mouth curled up. Young Master Yi, I can sense the person who forged this sword. As soon as she finished speaking, her body suddenly became illusory. In the next moment, her illusory figure passed through countless spaces and arrived at an unknown starry sky. Not far away from her, a woman in a plain dress stood quietly. Not far from her, over 10,000 mysterious experts were kneeling on the ground. Not only were they kneeling, but their bodies were also trembling and their faces were filled with terror. At this moment, the woman turned around and looked at the divine Dao Ling, what's the matter? The divine Dao Ling smiled. I am the ruler of the divine Dao nation. Your brother's life and death are in my hands. The divine Dao nation? The woman raised her brows. She opened her right hand, and the walking sword appeared in her hand. Point me in a direction. P.S. A reader's birthday requested an extra chapter. I couldn't refuse. Chapter 1916. Where was the nation of divine Dao? Hearing the woman's words, the faces of the mysterious experts behind her instantly changed. All the experts immediately crawled down and their bodies trembled violently. They were terrified to the extreme. Over 100 kilometers behind them was pitch black, and even the 10th layer of space had been obliterated. That place was originally their home. 15 minutes ago, the woman in a plain dress had asked them the same question, and 15 minutes later, their home was gone. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. Where is my home? The woman in a plain dress shook her head. There's no need for you to point. As she spoke, the walk sword in her hand suddenly flew out. The divine Dao Ling's pupils constricted when she saw the woman in a plain dress attack. Even though it was only an illusion, she didn't underestimate her opponent. When she was about to attack, that seemingly slow sword suddenly stabbed into the space between her brows. Bang! The divine Dao Ling's body instantly became illusory. The divine Dao Ling looked at the woman in a plain dress. I underestimated you. As soon as she finished speaking, her pupils constricted. In the nation of divine Dao, within the imperial palace, a sword stabbed into the space between the divine Dao Ling's brows without any warning. The divine Dao Ling's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? That was the first thought in her mind. How could she stab into my body from countless galaxies away? That was utterly impossible. Right at this moment, her body and soul were vanishing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The aura of death caused the divine Dao Ling's mind to clear up. The divine Dao Ling hurriedly looked at Yi Xian. I know Miss Nian. Yi Xian said, Qing, spare her life. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword between the divine Dao Ling's brows suddenly vanished, and the divine Dao Ling's body went limp and fell to the ground. In the unknown starry sky, the woman in a plain dress opened her palm, and a sword light fell into her palm. It was the walk sword. The woman in a plain dress turned to look at the group of mysterious experts before her. Do you want to live? All of them nodded in unison. The woman in a plain dress opened her left hand, and a portrait appeared in her hand. She opened the portrait. My brother. Everyone was stunned. What did that mean? The woman in a simple dress frowned slightly when she saw no one answer her. In an instant, the expressions of all of them turned grim, and the man in the lead hurriedly said, From this moment onward, Senior's older brother is our older brother. No, he's our master. We'll go and follow master right now. With that, he turned around and left with the mysterious powerhouses behind him. The man in the lead instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the woman in a simple dress didn't attack. Damn it. We were almost annihilated. Where did this deity come from? At this moment, an old man said, Grand Heavenly Venerate, what should we do now? Grand Empyrean pondered for a moment before saying, Go find that youth. The old man frowned. Are we really going to recognize that young man as our master? Grand Empyrean said angrily, What? Is it a loss for us to acknowledge him as our master? The elder hesitated for a moment before saying, We're a god-tier civilization after all. If we acknowledge someone else as our master, the Grand Empyrean stared at the old man. A level 10 civilization? Look carefully. We can't even take a single strike from him. You can't even take one sword. The old man's expression was quite unsightly. The Grand Empyrean slowly closed his eyes. Why didn't she kill us? Is it because she was benevolent? No. It's because we're willing to submit to her. Understand? The old man nodded. I understand. But how are we going to find that young man? The Grand Empyrean fell silent for a moment before he said, Didn't the image of a woman arrive just now? We can use the space-time mark she left here to find her. She should know where that young man is. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the experts behind him and vanished into the distance. Divine Dao Kingdom. Within a hall. Yi Xian sat at the side and drank tea slowly. On the other hand, the divine Dao Ling was sitting cross-legged at the side and healing herself. Even though the woman in a simple dress had withdrawn that sword strike, it had heavily injured her soul, so she was extremely weak at this moment. After a long time, the divine Dao Ling recovered slightly, and she gazed at Yi Xian who sat nearby. Who is she? Yi Xian replied, My younger sister. The divine Dao Ling fell silent. Yi Xian looked at the divine Dao Ling. What's your name? The divine Dao Ling replied, Divine Dao Ling. Yi Xian nodded. Miss Ling, let's talk about reason. I met the princess of your country, the divine Dao spirit. She insisted that I bow to her, but I didn't. Then she attacked me, and I killed her. Miss Ling, whose fault do you think it is? The divine Dao Ling glanced at Yi Xian. The one who attacked first was at fault. Yi Xian smiled. When I came to Divine Dao Kingdom, the young Marquis of the Divine Marquis Mansion provoked me for no reason, so the Divine Dao Ling said softly, young Master Yi, I understand what you mean. Yi Xian shook his head. You don't understand. Qing attacked. If Qing didn't make a move, you wouldn't have listened to me at all. Just like what you said before, the so-called reason is built on the foundation of strength. With that, he stood up and walked to the Divine Dao Ling. Miss Ling, I really want to kill you, and even destroy your Divine Dao Kingdom. Because I've been really angry since the beginning, but I didn't ask Qing to do that. Do you know why? With that, he walked out of the hall. The Divine Dao Ling suddenly said, young Master Yi, I want to know why. After all, if you didn't speak just now, I would have been dead. Yi Xian smiled. Because of Sister Nian. I don't have to give face to others, but I have to give face to Sister Nian. With that, he walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, he saw the Divine Marquis Mansion Situ Jing, and behind him stood a group of Divine Dao Kingdom officials. Situ Jing gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly pointed a finger at Yi Xian with fury. You're the one who killed Princess Ling and the junior marquis. Yi Xian nodded and smiled, that's me. The old man spoke furiously, how presumptuous. This is the Divine Dao Kingdom. How dare you act so arrogantly here? Capture him. Behind him, several soldiers were about to step forward and capture Yi Xian. However, at this moment, the Divine Dao Plume walked out of the hall. Everyone in the surroundings turned pale when they saw the Divine Dao Plume, and then they hurriedly knelt down. Your Majesty. Situ Jing didn't kneel, and he bowed slightly instead. The Divine Dao Ling's face remained emotionless. What are you doing? The old man hurriedly said, Your Majesty, he killed Princess Ling and the junior marquis of the Divine Marquis estate. His crimes are monstrous. I hope Your Majesty can execute him immediately and execute his entire family. Execute his entire family. The corners of Situ Jing's mouth twitched. At this moment, he thought of that woman in a plain dress. The old man intended to say something, but the Divine Dao Ling suddenly said, Shut up. The old man was stunned when he heard this. The other officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom were astounded as well, and Situ Jing, who led the group, had a gloomy expression on his face. Meanwhile, the Divine Dao Ling opened his palm, and then a dark golden command token slowly floated over to Yi Xian. The expressions of all the officials here changed drastically when they saw this golden command token. The Divine Emperor Token. It was a supreme command token because it was left behind by the Divine Emperor all those years ago. Seeing this command token was equivalent to seeing the Divine Emperor, and even the current ruler of the kingdom had to bow before it. Moreover, the command token could mobilize any army within the Divine Dao Kingdom. It could be said that the authority of this command token was merely inferior to the Divine Dao Ling. It was exactly because of the special nature of the Divine Emperor token that it had never left the Divine Dao race since the Divine Dao Kingdom was founded, and it had always been in the possession of the successive rulers of the Divine Dao Kingdom. Moreover, from a certain perspective, the Divine Emperor token could be considered as a token of trust of the Divine Dao Kingdom's ruler. Because the authority of the Divine Emperor token was truly too great. The successive rulers of the Divine Dao Kingdom didn't dare to give it to an outsider. Yet at this moment, the Divine Dao Ling actually intends to give it to this young man? All the experts of the Divine Dao Kingdom were stunned. On the other hand, the face of Situ Jing, who led the group, instantly turned pale, and her hand was trembling. The Divine Dao Ling gazed at Yi Xian, keep it. It'll be able to avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble in the future. Yi Xian glanced at the Divine Emperor token and shook his head. I don't deserve a reward without doing anything. I don't want it. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. All the officials of the Divine Dao Kingdom almost fainted when they heard Yi Xian. He actually doesn't want it? He actually doesn't want the Divine Emperor token? Some of the officials of the Divine Tao Kingdom couldn't restrain themselves from cursing. He actually refused the Divine Emperor token. Meanwhile, the Divine Dao Ling suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and she gazed at Yi Xian. This token can save you a lot of trouble. I presume that you don't want to cause unnecessary trouble just like what happened before, right? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he put the Divine Emperor token away, turned around, and left. He'd only taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped, and then he turned around to look at the Divine Dao Ling. Where's the Women's Academy? The Divine Dao Ling said, Divine Image Musa, take young Master Yi to the Women's Academy. Musa walked over to Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he gestured for Chen Shi to follow him. Yi Xian glanced at Musa and said, please lead the way. Musa hurriedly replied, I wouldn't dare. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Yi Xian along and vanished into the horizon. The officials of the Divine Tao Kingdom at the entrance to the Imperial Palace were stunned. Meanwhile, the Divine Dao Ling suddenly said, besides Old Man Situ and the others, everyone else is dismissed. The officials of the Divine Tao Kingdom hurriedly bowed respectfully and left. They weren't idiots, so they naturally noticed that something was off. After all, that young man possessed the Divine Emperor token. Would His Majesty give it away just like that? Of course not. After they left, Situ Jing gazed at the Divine Dao Ling. Your Majesty, the revenge of my Divine Marquis estate. The Divine Dao Ling stared at Situ Jing. Don't offend him. Situ Jing spoke in a low voice, Your Majesty, is dead. The Divine Dao Ling spoke softly, if you insist on taking revenge, then Wenren you won't be the only one to die, your entire Divine Marquis estate will die as well. Situ Jing's face froze when she heard this, and then she slowly knelt down and remained silent. The Divine Dao Ling walked over to Situ Jing and said, even if the Divine Marquis is alive, he has to endure it. Old man, if you continue to cause trouble for him, then I'll destroy the Divine Marquis estate. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Situ Jing remained silent, and his expression was extraordinarily calm. Chapter 1917. Musa brought Yi Xian to the Women's Academy. The Women's Academy wasn't in the imperial capital but in Yong City. On the way, Musa patiently explained to Yi Xian, Yong City is a small city. It was originally an abandoned ancient city. Because it's located in a remote area and it's surrounded by desert, no one lives in this city. His Majesty wanted Miss Mu Ninian to establish an academy in the imperial capital but she refused. We don't know why she chose such a remote place. Yi Xian smiled. Sister Nian. He was actually looking forward to meeting Sister Nian because he hadn't seen her for a long time. Musa looked at Yi Xian and said, Young Master Yi, do you know what token His Majesty gave you? Yi Xian opened his palm and the Divine Emperor token appeared in his hand. Is it very precious? Musa said, Young Master Yi, this is the Divine Emperor token. It's very precious. You can use it to mobilize any army in Shinto. Yi Xian looked at Musa, any army? Musa nodded, any army. Yi Xian said with a smile, so, this Divine Emperor token is very precious. Musa looked at Yi Xian and said, very, very precious. Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. Half an hour later, Musa and Yi Xian arrived at Yong City. Musa was slightly shocked when he arrived at Harmony City. Because he noticed that Harmony City was bustling with people and endless streams of horses and carriages. It was extremely bustling and flourishing. Not only that, he also sensed a very powerful aura in Yong City. Musa was shocked because Yong City had changed a lot. After entering the city, they went straight to the Women's Academy. The Women's Academy was located on a mountain. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, a pretty girl suddenly appeared in front of them. The girl looked at Yi Xian and Musa and smiled, You two don't look familiar. Musa said, Miss, this young Master Yi wants to see your dean. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi? Yi Xian nodded. Tell Sister Nian that I'm here. The woman blinked. You know the dean? Yi Xian nodded. The woman smiled and said, the dean is not here. Yi Xian frowned. Not here? The woman nodded. She left with Miss An and the others a few days ago. Yi Xian asked, where did he go? The woman shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian said solemnly, who is in charge of the academy now? The woman said, Instructor Ding. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, take me to see her. The woman hesitated for a moment before she said, should I go notify them? Yi Xian nodded. All right. The woman was just about to turn around and leave when a voice resounded from the mountain, let him in. The woman was slightly stunned, and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded, and then he turned around to look at Musa. Musa, let's part ways here. Musa nodded. Young Master Yi, take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian followed the woman to the top of the mountain, and Yi Xian saw a woman in a small courtyard. He knew her, and it was Miss Ding. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Aunt Ding. Miss Ding smiled, I thought that you would only arrive after some time. I never expected that you would arrive so quickly. Yi Xian smiled, Aunt Ding, I never expected that you would be here as well. Miss Ding glanced at Yi Xian. The seamless state. Yi Xian nodded. Miss Ding stood up. Follow me. As soon as she finished speaking, she walked to the side, and Yi Xian hurriedly followed her. On the way, Miss Ding asked, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian said solemnly, improve my strength. Miss Ding smiled, the best way to improve my strength is to fight. Yi Xian nodded, indeed. Miss Ding said, Miss Nian said that if you come, she will bring you to a place. Yi Xian was slightly curious, where? Miss Ding said, the city of myriad domains. Yi Xian frowned, the city of myriad domains? Miss Ding stopped, and she looked at Yi Xian, give me your Shao Tan azure sword. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he passed the Shao Tan azure sword to Miss Ding. Miss Ding said, I will temporarily keep them for you. As she spoke, she pointed to a teleportation array not far away, go in. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he asked, Aunt Ding, is it dangerous inside? Miss Ding nodded, very dangerous. Yi Xian, Miss Ding smiled, are you afraid? Yi Xian said with a smile, what are you afraid of? As he spoke, he glanced at Shao Tan Miss Ding's hand, Aunt Ding, can this Shao Ta enter with me? Miss Ding smiled, give me a reason. Yi Xian said, I have been through life and death with it for so many years, and I have feelings for it. Moreover, I also want to bring it along for the training this time. Miss Ding looked at Yi Xian for a moment, and then she smiled, all right. As she spoke, she passed Shao Ta to Yi Xian. After receiving Shao Ta, Yi Xian bowed slightly, Aunt Ding, I will be going now. As he spoke, he entered the teleportation array. The teleportation array was activated, and in an instant, Yi Xian disappeared. After Yi Xian disappeared, Miss Ding was silent for a moment, and then she turned to leave. Divine Dao Nation, inside the palace. Musa walked to the Shinto Dao Ling and bowed slightly, Your Majesty, young Master Yi has gone to the city of myriad domains. The Shinto Dao Ling frowned slightly, city of myriad domains? Musa nodded. The Shinto Dao Ling was silent. Musa hesitated for a moment, and then he asked, what is Your Majesty worried about? The Shinto Dao Ling said softly, the city of myriad domains, this means that he will come into contact with the savage land. Musa said solemnly, Your Majesty is worried that young Master Yi will join the savage land? The Shinto Dao Ling nodded. Musa's face was gloomy, Your Majesty, young Master Yi has the Divine Emperor token. If he really joins the savage land, it will be a devastating disaster for our divine Dao nation. After a moment of silence, the Shinto Dao Ling said softly, let's wait and see for now. Musa suddenly bowed slightly, Your Majesty, it is better to be safe than sorry. Your Majesty, please take back the Divine Emperor token immediately. The Shinto Dao Ling glanced at Musa, I just gave it out, and you want to take it back? I am not as thick-skinned as you. Musa said solemnly, but Your Majesty, if that young Master Yi becomes friends with the savage land, then, the Shinto Dao Ling said softly, don't worry. This young Master Yi is too stubborn. If he goes to the city of myriad domains, he will only cause trouble, big trouble at that. So, let's just wait and see. As she said that, she seemed to have thought of something and frowned slightly, send an order to the city of myriad domains. In our divine Dao nation, no one is to provoke him, no matter who it is. Musa smiled bitterly, forget it. The more we do this, the more likely those little fellows will provoke him. The Shinto Dao Ling nodded, then let them be. With that, she turned and left. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment, he was already in front of an old city. The sky was dark and covered in dark clouds, and it was extremely oppressive. The city before him was very old and slightly shabby, and it emitted a pungent smell of blood. Yi Xian said softly, this is not a good place. As he spoke, he walked towards the center of the city. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head and saw a man staring at him from the city wall not far away. The man held a dagger in his hand, and the dagger was still stained with blood. Yi Xian ignored the man and continued walking towards the city. At this moment, the man suddenly smiled, brother, please wait. Yi Xian looked at the man, and the man grinned, I am a little short of money recently, and I want to borrow some soul crystals from you. Don't worry, I will definitely return what I borrow. Robbery. Yi Xian smiled, how much do you want? The man chuckled, give me 1 million. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a spatial ring floated before the man. There were exactly 1 million soul crystals in the spatial ring. The man was stunned. He gave it to me just like that? In the distance, Yi Xian walked towards the city. The man looked at the spatial ring in front of him in a daze. This was the smoothest robbery he had ever had. A moment later, the man put the spatial ring away and caught up to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the man, what? Not enough? The man said in a low voice, brother, is this your first time coming to the city of myriad domains? Yi Xian nodded, first time. The man smiled, brother, do you know what kind of place this city of myriad domains is? Yi Xian shook his head, it's my first time here, so I don't know anything. The man smiled, I'm Kuxia, from the Divine Dao Nation. Divine Dao Nation. Yi Xian smiled lightly, Yi Xian. The man spoke in a low voice, brother Yi, it's easy for problems to arise if you walk on the streets like this. Yi Xian smiled, get robbed? Kuxia nodded, and then he glanced at the surroundings and said, follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Yi Xian to the right. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared before them, and the man glanced at Kuxia before looking at Yi Xian with a hostile expression. Kuxia chuckled, Li Ka, he's my man. Li Ka glanced coldly at Kuxia, your man? Kuxia nodded, mine. Li Ka's face was expressionless, is your man that insensible? Kuxia's eyes narrowed slightly, what? You're not even going to give me this little bit of face? A wisp of a ridiculing smile appeared on the corners of Li Ka's mouth. Face? Kuxia, why should I give you face? Don't think that I don't know that you've already obtained benefits from him. You've obtained benefits yourself, and you're asking us to give you face? I'm giving it to your ancestors. As he said that, he angrily pointed at Yi Xian, if you don't give me 1 million soul crystals, don't even think about crossing this road. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. Chi! Before Kuxia could react, Li Ka's throat was directly pierced by Yi Xian's sword. Instant kill. Ku Xia was dumbfounded. Li Ka was also dumbfounded. Yi Xian exerted force with his right hand, and the sword directly pierced through Li Ka's throat, causing blood to spurt out. Li Ka stared at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with resentment. You're pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Yi Xian opened his palm, and Li Ka's storage ring flew into his hand. Li Ka still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword. Chi! Li Ka was directly erased. Seeing this scene, the corner of Ku Xia's mouth twitched. Damn, this guy is really fierce. Seeing that Yi Xian was about to leave, Ku Xia hurriedly followed. Brother Yi, what are you doing in the city of myriad domains? Yi Xian subconsciously said, I'm here to act cool. Oh no, I'm here to gain experience. Ku Xia. P.S. New Year, too busy, really too busy. I don't even have time to write every day. Finally, Happy New Year's Eve everyone. Chapter 1918. Ku Xia's expression was a little strange. Is this guy here to act cool? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother Ku Xia, can you tell me more about the city of myriad domains? Ku Xia hurriedly nodded, of course. The city of myriad domains is divided into 3 camps. The first is my divine Dao nation, the second is the wildlands, and the third is the heavenly abyss sacred gate. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Wildlands? Heavenly abyss sacred gate? Ku Xia nodded. The wildlands are my divine Dao nation's mortal enemy. Back then, when His Majesty the Divine Emperor conquered the various worlds, the wildlands divine race refused to submit. Thus, the Divine Emperor banished them to an extremely remote wildlands continent, which is the wildlands. Now, the wildland celestial race has regained some vitality and has been going against my divine Dao nation. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why didn't the Divine Emperor directly exterminate the wildland celestial race? Ku Xia shook his head. I don't know. Yi Xian nodded slightly. What about the Heavenly Abyss Sacred Gate? Ku Xia said, the Heavenly Abyss Sacred Gate was once the number 1 sect and is still the current number 1 sect. Back then, before the Divine Emperor was born, they were the strongest sect in the myriad worlds. Moreover, the Divine Emperor seemed to have a deep relationship with them. But for some reason, they moved away and never stepped into the Divine Dao nation again. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. Then, he looked around. Do they usually fight? Ku Xia said solemnly, not usually. Yi Xian frowned slightly, not usually? Ku Xia nodded. Not only do they not fight, they usually trade with each other. As he spoke, he pointed to a street in the distance. That's the Black Market Street. If you have any treasures, you can go there to sell them. Yi Xian looked at the street in the distance. There were quite a number of people setting up stalls on the street. Ku Xia said, that is the only absolutely safe place in this city because no one dares to make a move there. That place is protected by the 3 factions' bosses. Of course, if you want to enter and sell something, no matter what you sell, you have to hand over 10% of the transaction to the 3 factions' bosses. Yi Xian was a little curious. 3 leaders? Ku Xia nodded. Our Divine Dao Nation's boss is Fong Lin. This person's background is a little mysterious. There are rumors that he is the crown prince of the Divine Dao Nation's number 1 clan, the very first clan. There are also rumors that he is a member of the royal family. His true identity is unknown. Yi Xian was curious. How does the very race compare to the Divine Marquis Manor? Ku Xia said solemnly, at the beginning, the 2 families were actually equal in strength, because the Divine Marquis and the Supreme Divine Image were the most important figures by the Divine Emperor's side. But as time went on, the Divine Marquis Palace fell behind the very race. This is because the Divine Marquis Manor has never produced any super geniuses, but the very race has produced a few. Yi Xian smiled and asked, what about the Divine Dao Nation's royal family? Ku Xia hesitated for a moment before he said, Brother, it's not my place to speak about the matters of the imperial family. Yi Xian smiled. What I'm more curious about is that there are so many noble families in the divine Dao nation. Don't they pose any threat to the imperial power? You should know that if an aristocratic family is powerful enough, they will definitely threaten the imperial power. Ku Xia smiled bitterly. How would I dare? Yi Xian was curious. Why wouldn't I dare? Ku Xia said solemnly, there are many reasons why the divine Dao nation's royal family has been able to exist until now, but the main reason is that every generation of divine master is not a pushover. Moreover, the divine emperor has decreed that the throne of the divine Dao nation is only passed on to the virtuous, not the eldest. This virtuous also includes women. As long as you have the ability, even a woman can become the queen of the divine Dao nation. Yi Xian frowned slightly. If a woman is the queen of the divine Dao nation, this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. Queen, doesn't that mean that the divine Dao nation could become someone else's? Ku Xia smiled. A woman's child can also inherit the throne, but they must have the direct bloodline of the divine Dao race. To be more precise, a woman's child's bloodline will be devoured by the divine Dao bloodline from the moment they are born. Moreover, if a woman is the queen, her child must be born with the divine Dao surname. Yi Xian said softly, so that's how it is. Ku Xia continued, moreover, the divine Dao race has an extremely terrifying divine Dao army left behind by the divine emperor. Back then, this divine Dao army followed the divine emperor to conquer the myriad heavens and has never been defeated. Even the strongest barbarian cavalry of the barbarian divine race was defeated by the divine Dao army. Hearing this, Yi Xian was a little curious. Could his divine emperor token mobilize the divine Dao army? He felt a little uncertain. Ku Xia continued, the boss of the barbarian lands is called Tianu. This person is not from the barbarian divine race, but his position in the barbarian divine race is extraordinary. Even some of the direct descendants of the barbarian divine race are willing to obey his orders. Yi Xian asked, what about the heavenly abyss holy gate? Ku Xia said, the heavenly abyss holy maiden, her name is unknown. She is a very mysterious woman who rarely appears. Yi Xian was a little curious. If they don't fight, then what's the point of this place? Ku Xia pointed in the distance. Behind this heavenly abyss city, there is a mountain range, and there is a ruin in the mountain range. No one knows from which era, but that ruin is the real reason everyone came here. However, we can no longer enter its depths because it involves the 10th layer of space-time. Yi Xian smiled. The divine Dao nation didn't want to take it for themselves? Ku Xia shook his head. They wanted to take it for themselves, but in the end, they compromised. Because if the divine Dao nation wanted to take it for themselves, the heavenly abyss holy gate and the barbarian lands would join forces. This is not what the divine Dao nation wants to see, because the heavenly abyss holy gate has always been neutral. Yi Xian asked, the divine Dao nation has never thought of roping in the heavenly abyss holy gate to deal with the barbarian lands? Ku Xia smiled bitterly, I don't know about that. Yi Xian smiled, brother Ku Xia, let's part ways here. With that, he walked into the distance. Ku Xia hesitated for a moment, then asked, brother Yi, where are you going? Yi Xian didn't answer and disappeared into the distance without looking back. Ku Xia glanced at Yi Xian, who was at the end of her line of sight, and said softly, what a weirdo. Yi Xian directly left the city of Myriad Domain and came to a mountain range. His goal was also the ruin. He actually didn't have much interest in the treasures in the ruin, because with Xiao Ta and the Azure Profound Sword, he really didn't have much interest in other treasures. In a short while, Yi Xian came to the depths of the mountain range. At a glance, the mountain range in the distance was hazy, completely illusory. Not simple. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian continued forward. When he came to the deepest part of the mountain range, Yi Xian frowned because he discovered that the space-time here was somewhat different. The space-time here had changed. The place he was in now was actually the 8th layer of space-time, but nothing around him had changed. What's going on? Yi Xian frowned. This place isn't simple. After a short while, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and continued forward. When he crossed a small river, he stopped because he discovered that he'd entered the 9th layer of spacetime. The 9th layer of spacetime. Yi Xian frowned. This place was so weird. The further he went, this chapter isn't finished, please continue. The spacetime here was stronger. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian continued forward. When he entered the 9th layer of spacetime, Yi Xian secretly became vigilant. Even though there were no changes in the surroundings, he still didn't dare be careless. He continued forward, and it didn't take long for him to arrive at a valley. After entering the valley, his expression gradually became serious because he noticed that the spacetime pressure in the valley was growing stronger and stronger. At this moment, he didn't have the Azure Profound Sword, so he could ignore the spacetime pressure. So, he had to be careful. At this moment, Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. Not far in front of him sat a man. The man's head was lowered, and there was no sign of life. It was obvious that he'd died. Yi Xian walked in front of the man. The man was still holding a storage ring in his hand, and there was a spear on the ground. The spear was pure white, and it was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary item. Yi Xian glanced at the man, and he was a little curious. How did this guy die? At this moment, footsteps sounded from the side. Yi Xian turned to look. Not far away, a woman was slowly walking over. The woman was wearing a dark purple dress, and her face was covered with a veil. Her true appearance couldn't be seen, but her figure was excellent. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian cupped his fists. Yi Xian. The woman frowned slightly. Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. The woman shook her head. Never heard of it. Yi Xian smiled. Miss, you are? The woman looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian shrugged and walked into the distance. At this moment, the woman said, if you continue forward, you will die. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There were 2 mountains in the distance, and between the mountains was a crevice. Below the crevice was a Xiaodao. It was very small, and only enough for one person to pass through. Yi Xian turned to look at the woman, and asked, what's in front? The woman said, the gate of the ruins. Yi Xian asked again, Miss, do you know what ruins are inside? The woman looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian blinked. Am I very handsome? The woman was slightly taken aback. What was he talking about? Yi Xian smiled. Miss, if I'm not wrong, you should be the mysterious Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden, right? The woman nodded slightly. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. My name is Yi Xian. What about you? The Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden didn't say anything again. Yi Xian shook his head, turned around, and left. The Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden said again, you will die. Yi Xian didn't even look back. None of your business. With that, he quickly walked toward the Xiaodao. Arrogant? I'm more arrogant than you. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden frowned. How rude. In the distance, Yi Xian had already walked in front of the Xiaodao. When he was about to step into the Xiaodao, his expression suddenly changed, because he realized that the spacetime in front of him was no longer the 9th spacetime. The 10th spacetime. The spacetime in front of him was already the 10th spacetime, and the spacetime pressure in it was no longer something he could withstand. If he forced his way in, as the Heaven Abyss Holy Maiden said, he would really die. But if he retreated now, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? And it would be embarrassing in front of a woman. Yi Xian thought about it, then turned around and left. Damn it. He didn't have any face, so how could he lose it? End of this chapter. Chapter 1919. Seeing Yi Xian retreat, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden's eyes were calm, as if she was not surprised at all. After Yi Xian retreated to the side, he sat cross-legged on the ground and pondered. The tenth spacetime. He had already felt the tenth spacetime just now, and the spacetime pressure contained in the tenth spacetime was not something he could withstand at the moment. At this moment, Yi Xian was a little curious. What kind of relic was this? Would there be an 11th spacetime behind it? At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden walked to Yi Xian's side and glanced at Yi Xian. Seamless realm. Yi Xian ignored her. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden continued, "You were able to reach here with the seamless realm, not simple at all." Yi Xian still did not speak. Seeing this, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned slightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly got up and walked to the front of Xiao Dao. Looking at the Xiao Dao in front of him, Yi Xian was silent for a moment, and he suddenly stepped out. As his foot landed, the spacetime around the Xiao Dao directly distorted and became illusory. Seeing this scene, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden's pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment, Yi Xian retreated again, and at this moment, his eyes were filled with excitement. The reason he could step into the 10th spacetime just now was because he had used the mysterious spacetime in Xiao Ta's body. He could already use Xiao Ta to fuse with that mysterious spacetime, and that mysterious spacetime had absolute suppression on the 10th spacetime. Unfortunately, he could not fuse with that mysterious spacetime for too long. However, he was not in a hurry. He could take it slowly. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden suddenly asked, "How did you do it?" Yi Xian ignored the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden and sat cross-legged to recover his vitality. Every time he used that mysterious spacetime, it consumed a lot of energy. Seeing that Yi Xian did not reply, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned slightly. "I'm asking you a question." Yi Xian turned to look at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. "Am I very familiar with you?" Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden, Yi Xian retracted his gaze and continued to devour the soul crystals. He, Yi Xian, liked to make friends, but he didn't like to make friends with arrogant people. "Arrogant? I'm more arrogant than you." The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden glanced at Yi Xian and did not ask further. She also had a temper. An hour later, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked toward Xiao Dao. The Heavenly Abyss Saintess hurried to look at Yi Xian curiously. Yi Xian stepped into the Xiao Dao. The moment he stepped into the Xiao Dao, the 10th spacetime in the Xiao Dao area became illusory. It wasn't that it couldn't withstand Yi Xian, it was that it couldn't withstand that mysterious spacetime. After taking 3 steps, Yi Xian suddenly retreated. Seeing this, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden frowned. "Why did you retreat? Continue walking." Yi Xian turned to look at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden. "What does it have to do with you?" Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and continued to devour soul crystals to recover his energy. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden walked to Yi Xian's side and looked at Yi Xian. "What secret technique did you use to step into the 10th spacetime? This secret technique consumes a lot of energy, and you can't use it for a long time, right?" Yi Xian didn't answer and continued to devour soul crystals. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Maiden glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. A moment later, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked toward Xiao Dao. Just like that, Yi Xian entered the 10th spacetime again and again. At first, he could only take 3 steps, but now, he could take 10 steps. Not only that, after fusing with that mysterious spacetime, he could last for 12 breaths. He was passing through the 10th spacetime in front of him. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince will be removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. And on both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yiling, and she was Yi Xian's biological sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you remove him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting? Leave. Yiling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he is removed or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment, the new crown prince Yiling suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yiling, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, Young Master Yiling inherits the title of crown prince, it is the wish of everyone. What are you shouting for? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen, but she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yiling looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yiling nodded, You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. I will go through fire and water for the crown prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yiling nodded slightly, Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall, don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yiling, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yiling's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, which was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yiling's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yiling, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu once more. At this time, Yiling suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yiling's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, Your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu. As he walked up to Yi Ling, seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. But now, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince, and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince, and I will risk my life for him." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed, brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pang! Chapter 1920. Insult? Xiong Ho chuckled and said, little big brother, she didn't insult you because she can see through your nature. Your nature is lustful, that's why she said that. Yi Xian was speechless. Shen Qin looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. Do you know what you've done? Yi Xian said solemnly, I'm just passing by. Shen Qin pointed at Xiong Ho, a little angry. Do you know who she is? Yi Xian glanced at Xiong Ho and shook his head, I don't know. Shen Qin glared at Yi Xian. You're in big trouble. Yi Xian was speechless. I didn't F** King do anything. Did he cause trouble again? At this time, the divine quilt looked at Xiong Ho. What do you want to do? Xiong Ho blinked, you've trapped me for so long, and now I'm out. You ask me what I want to do? Shen Qin, can you not ask such an idiotic question? You'll make me despise you. Shen Qin looked at Xiong Ho and didn't say anything. However, the temperature was dropping at a terrifying rate. Xiong Ho, on the other hand, looked calm with a faint smile on her face. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly said, big shots, I'm just passing by. Go ahead. With that, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, the divine quilt suddenly said, you can't leave. Yi Xian looked at the divine quilt. Why? However, Shen Qin did not say anything. Xiong Ho laughed and said, little brother, she wants to use the mysterious spacetime in your body to seal me. You're not going to help him, are you? As she spoke, she smiled faintly. Her smile was a little horrifying. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I'm really not interested in interfering in the enmity between seniors. I'm just passing by. At this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, young lord, when did you become such a coward? Yi Xian's face darkened. Do you think I'm like you? Big brother, even if you want to be arrogant, you have to look at your partner, okay? Xiao Ta said calmly, under 3 swords, who do we need to be afraid of? Yi Xian had a headache. He really wanted to give this Xiao Ta a stab. Ever since he was transformed, this Xiao Ta didn't even put his father in his eyes. If this went on, something would happen sooner or later. Meanwhile, Xiong Ho smiled and said, big brother, they won't let you off because you have a mysterious space within you. They'll definitely think of a way to obtain it and use it against me. Yi Xian looked at Xiong Ho. What about you? You can kill me now and obtain the mysterious spacetime in my body, can't you? Xiong Ho rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. I'm not that bad. Shen Qin spoke indifferently. The reason she hasn't attacked is because she doesn't know your origins. But I believe that she definitely won't let you go, because once she obtains the mysterious spacetime in your body, her strength will undergo an earth-shaking change. Xiong-ho glared at the divine quilt. Don't try to sow discord between us. Yi Xian was silent. He felt like he'd been swept into a huge vortex. Shen Qin intended to say something, but Xiong-ho suddenly smiled and said, Shen Qin, let's stop reminiscing for today. We'll catch up another day. As she spoke, she waved her right hand. Bang! Shen Qin's image was instantly obliterated. Xiong-ho gazed at Yi Xian and smiled, let's go. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, let's go. Xiong-ho blinked. We're on the same side now. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiong-ho smiled, don't worry, I won't hurt you. Yi Xian asked, Miss Xiong-ho, are you from the Divine Dao Nation? Xiong-ho took the candied fruit in Yi Xian's hand, and then she said, no. However, I know a little about the Divine Dao Nation you speak of, Dao Yi. The one who founded the Divine Dao Nation is called Shen Dao Ming, right? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. All I know is that the world calls him the Divine Emperor. Xiong-ho smiled, then it should be that guy. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Xiong-ho knows the Divine Emperor? Xiong-ho nodded, he comes from the same place as me and that Shen Qin. He's an extraordinary person. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian, do you have enmity with him? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, I almost do. If Qing really destroyed the Divine Dao Nation with a single sword strike, then it would be a great enmity. Of course, he didn't panic. If he had the guts, then he would go look for Qing. Xiong-ho sized up Yi Xian, and then she said, the mysterious spacetime within your body. Yi Xian smiled, you want it? Xiong-ho blinked, are you willing to give it to me? Yi Xian looked straight at Xiong-ho, if I don't give it to you, will you take it from me? Xiong-ho looked at Yi Xian for a moment, and then she grinned, no. Yi Xian smiled, then I won't give it to you. Xiong-ho smiled, and then she said, let's go. As she spoke, she walked into the distance. When Yi Xian and Xiong-ho walked out of the Xiao Dao, Xiong-ho turned to look, and in an instant, the small hall behind her directly burst into flames. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed. Even the 10th and 11th spacetime were burning. Xiong-ho turned to look at Yi Xian, let's go. As she spoke, she and Yi Xian left this strange spacetime. As soon as they left, the two saw the heavenly abyss holy lady, and beside her stood a man. Xiong-ho looked at Yi Xian, and said with a smile, your friend? Yi Xian shook his head. Xiong-ho smiled slightly, and didn't speak. At this moment, the man beside the heavenly abyss holy lady suddenly said, you're from the Divine Dao Nation? Yi Xian looked at the man, you are? The man smiled, Fong Lin. Yi Xian sized up the man, so this was the boss of the Divine Dao Nation in the city of Myriad Domain, Fong Lin. Fong Lin glanced at Xiong-ho beside Yi Xian, and said with a smile, young Master Yi, this is? Yi Xian was about to speak, but Xiong-ho suddenly smiled and said, I'm his younger sister. Younger sister. Yi Xian was speechless, another younger sister. Fong Lin smiled, younger sister? Xiong-ho smiled, do you have a problem? Fong Lin stared at Xiong-ho, young lady should have come out from inside. Fong Lin nodded, yes. Hearing this, Fong Lin and the heavenly abyss holy lady looked at each other, then Fong Lin looked at Yi Xian, young Master Yi is very capable. We spent more than 10 years to enter the mystic realm, but young Master Yi came today and entered it. Amazing. Yi Xian smiled, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Fong Lin smiled, young Master Yi, since you're a straightforward person, then I'll say it directly. We want a share of the ruins. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, then looked at Xiong Ho beside him. She came out from the ruins. If you want a share, then look for her. Xiong Ho. Fang Lin and the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady looked at Xiong Ho. In fact, their real target was Xiong Ho, who came out from the ruins. Xiong Ho looked at the two of them and smiled. You want a share? Fang Lin and the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady had a trace of wariness in their eyes. At this moment, Xiong Ho suddenly took a step forward, and in an instant, Fang Lin and the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady burst into flames. Their expressions changed drastically, and they resisted frantically, but it was useless. At this moment, the two of them were terrified. Xiong Ho suddenly looked at Yi Xian and smiled. If you plead on their behalf, I can let them go. Hearing this, Fang Lin and the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady quickly looked at Yi Xian, their eyes full of pleading. Yi Xian smiled. Lady Xiong Ho, whether you kill them or not is your own business. What does it have to do with me? If you want to kill them, then kill them. If you don't, then don't. Don't drag me into this. Xiong Ho smiled. Then I'll kill them. At this moment, Fang Lin suddenly said, Yi Xian, if I die here today, the very ones will not let you go. F***ck. Yi Xian was in disbelief. Big brother, you have to understand that the one who killed you is this little girl. What does it have to do with me? Have you been burned senseless? Fang Lin said crazily, you can save us both. Yi Xian asked, why should I save you? Fang Lin roared, the very ones will not let you go. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady suddenly said, if young Master Yi is willing to save us, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Sect will reward you handsomely. Yi Xian looked at Xiong Ho. This woman has a nice mouth. Let her go. Xiong Ho's lips curled up. I'll give you face. As she said this, she waved her right hand, and the flames on the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady disappeared. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady collapsed to the ground. On the other hand, Fang Lin was dumbfounded. He wanted to say something, but Yi Xian said, I don't know the man. Fang Lin was speechless. A moment later, Fang Lin was burned into nothingness by the mysterious flames. Yi Xian looked at the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady. At this moment, the Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady was extremely weak. It was as if her soul could disappear at any moment. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady looked at Yi Xian and said weakly, thank you. Yi Xian smiled, you said you would give me benefits. The Heavenly Abyss Holy Lady nodded, I will. Yi Xian smiled, I'll be waiting. As he said this, he looked at Xiong Ho. Miss Xiong Ho, where are you going? Xiong Ho licked her sugar-coated haws, then said, I'll go wherever you go. Yi Xian's face darkened. What do you mean? Xiong Ho smiled and said, it's exactly what it means. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xiong Ho, you're free now. If you want revenge, go find that divine quilt. Why are you following me? Xiong Ho smiled, I've been sealed for too long. I need to heal now. Yi Xian's face darkened. If you need to heal, then why are you following me? I can't heal you. Xiong Ho licked her sugar-coated haws and smiled, why don't you want me to follow you? I can help you fight. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xiong Ho, I've already said it. I don't want to get involved in the matter between you and that divine quilt. Now that you're free, you can go do what you need to do, alright? Xiong Ho looked at Yi Xian and smiled, I won't. I want to follow you. Yi Xian was silent. He was a little angry. He really wanted to kill this guy with a sword. At this time, Xiao Ta suddenly said, young master, this woman is really arrogant. But it's okay, after we get out, let her use the green profound sword to sense Sister Tianming, then she'll behave. My sister Tianming specializes in all kinds of arrogant people. Yi Xian, you're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.